A cynical voice marvels at the existence of a woman foolish enough to be blinded by the mere title of consort. Looking down with cold eyes, a blond man harshly declares that their marriage is nothing more than a strict contract. Despite his high-handed attitude, the woman gazes up at him and decides he isn't entirely bad since he permits them both to live exactly as they please. Leaning in closer, he coldly emphasizes that as long as she fulfills her basic role, absolutely nothing else matters. She accepts his coldness effortlessly because past trauma already taught her what true hatred actually looks like. Her memories flash back to eyes filled with a terrifying, genuine loathing directed solely at her. 10 years ago, a desperate mother clutched her young daughter and tearfully begged a madam for forgiveness. An unseen authority figure sharply commands silence, stripping the mother of any right to speak. The cruel voices brand the mother a monster for maliciously toying with human hearts. Trembling in fear, the mother holds her child tighter as the oppressive atmosphere closes in on them. Chaos erupts as unseen hands violently grab at them while someone orders the guards to catch the girl. Tears streaming down her face, the mother desperately pleads for the attackers to stop and let go. Screaming in sheer panic, the mother cries out for Eliza as they are forcefully torn apart. Reaching out helplessly, young Eliza wails for her mother as the separation becomes permanent. The devastating trauma of the forced separation leaves the young girl sobbing uncontrollably in pure despair. Jolting awake in a cold sweat, an older Eliza pants heavily in her lonely bed. Still trembling from the nightmare, she slowly sits up and clutches her blankets in the quiet room. Touching her tear-stained cheek, she whispers a quiet reassurance to herself that it was only a dream. The morning sun rises over the grand estate of Lord Otto Luna in the Elender Kingdom's Luna territory. Dressed in drab servant attire, Eliza reveals that she has been forced to work there ever since being separated from her mother. Walking through the halls, she quietly endures the mocking giggles of the other maids. The other servants actively avert their gaze and ignore her presence entirely as she goes about her chores. With a resigned sigh, she admits to having long since gotten used to being treated as if she doesn't exist. Highlighting her complete isolation, she resides entirely alone in a room assigned to her within a remote tower. Every single day at dawn, she silently completes her delivered tasks without any human interaction. Broken by years of neglect, she confesses she has lost even the basic will to ask why she is treated so poorly. Her mind drifts back to her early days of work until a sudden clatter breaks her train of thought. A younger Eliza gasps in dismay as she accidentally drops a wooden bucket and scatters potatoes across the stone floor. Cutting through the usual hostility, a gentle voice suddenly asks the kneeling girl if she is all right. Looking up in surprise, Eliza locks eyes with a gentle female servant who finally showed her true kindness. The kind servant reassures young Eliza that everything is all right, prompting a grateful thank you from the relieved child. Young Eliza looks up with wide, tear-filled eyes, deeply moved by this rare display of warmth. From that day on, the kind servant would gently help her with chores and secretly bring her little gifts to brighten her dismal days. The older servant warmly surprises young Eliza with a hidden sweet treat, bringing a rare sparkle of joy to the girl's eyes. Sitting together in a quiet corner, the servant offers her some sweet bread from town, smiling as Eliza asks in disbelief if it is truly for her. A gentle smile graces the servant's face as she watches young Eliza happily devour the delicious pastry. The heartwarming memory shatters as the harsh voice of the head madam echoes, furiously demanding to know why the servant is associating with the forbidden child. Peeking nervously from behind a wall, young Eliza watches as her only friend desperately tries to defend her innocence to the unyielding madam. The cruel superior immediately shuts down the plea, coldly refusing to hear any excuses for breaking the estate's unspoken rules. Without a shred of mercy, the madam fires the kind servant on the spot, ignoring the woman's desperate protests. Trembling in the shadows as the weeping maid is violently ordered to leave immediately, Eliza is paralyzed by helpless panic over what she should do. The crushing weight of guilt bears down on the little girl as she realizes this tragedy is entirely her fault. Suddenly, a sinister voice dripping with mock pity cuts through the heavy atmosphere behind her. Startled out of her despair, Eliza whips her head around in sheer terror. Another female authority figure looms over her, her greeting laced with a venomous sweetness. The woman cruelly notes the tragic irony of the fired servant losing her livelihood despite having her own child to feed. A harsh hand suddenly grabs the trembling girl's chin, forcing her to look up into a gaze of pure malice. Smiling with sadistic delight, The woman bluntly declares that the servant's ruined life is entirely Eliza's fault. Tears stream down the devastated child's face as she is ruthlessly told that her mere existence brings nothing but cursed misfortune to everyone she touches. The woman roughly dismisses Eliza's tears, sneering that her constant crying over every little thing is incredibly annoying. Leaning in closer, the tormentor commands the broken child to listen very carefully to her next words. The woman severely warns that the guards will stop any escape attempt and that prying will only result in her tutor losing their job. Turning slightly, the abuser issues a chilling ultimatum regarding the safety of everyone around the young girl. Leaving the isolated child utterly crushed, the woman orders her to know her lowly place and act accordingly to spare others from pain. Snapping back to the present, adult Eliza reflects with solemn resolve that she never wanted to cause such tragic collateral damage again. Staring blankly ahead, she silently acknowledges that if interacting with others meant bringing them ruin, isolation was the only path. Embracing her cursed fate, she firmly concludes that she would much rather endure a lifetime of suffering completely alone. Dawn breaks over the remote tower of the Luna estate, signaling the start of yet another bleak and lonely day. Suddenly, violent banging on her heavy wooden door violently shatters the morning silence, startling Eliza from her grim memories. A harsh voice demands she prepare herself immediately for a sudden summons from the master, to which a resigned Eliza simply agrees. Looking anxious, Eliza stands silently with a bead of sweat on her cheek. Walking through the halls, she wonders why the master would call for her so early in the morning when they haven't seen each other in a long time. Escorted by a male servant, she stands quietly as he knocks firmly on the large wooden door. The door clicks open as the servant announces her arrival to the master, his wife, and their son sitting on the couches inside. Facing the back of the woman's head, Eliza is abruptly commanded to sit down. Her eyes widen slightly as she apprehensively takes in the tense atmosphere of the room. Staring at the imposing figures, she nervously notes that the madam and the master's son, North, are both present. Astonished that this gathering is entirely for her, she receives a stern confirmation. Breaking the heavy silence, the master coldly remarks that it has been a while since they last saw each other. Bowing her head slightly, she politely replies that it indeed has been a long time. A deep sense of dread washes over her as the master declares he will get straight to the point. Without any warning, he announces that she has received an official marriage proposal. To her absolute shock, he reveals her suitor is none other than the country's third prince, Rio. Trembling with confusion, she asks why His Highness would ever propose to a lowly servant like her. A slight smirk crossing his lips, the master begins to explain the hidden reason. Staring directly at her, he drops the life-shattering revelation that she is actually his daughter. Her face goes completely blank as a quiet gasp of pure disbelief escapes her lips. Looking away, he casually confesses that she was born from an affair between him and her mother, a former servant. He confirms that, despite her harsh upbringing, she genuinely bears the noble blood of the Luna family. Stuttering helplessly, her mind reels as she tries to process the terrifying fact that the master is her father. Closing her eyes, she desperately tries to reject the impossible truth echoing in her mind. Gripping her dress, a dark thought surfaces as she wonders about the terrifying implications of this revelation. Her heart pounds as she furiously questions why she and her mother were so violently torn apart on that traumatic day 10 years ago. Ignoring her internal turmoil, the master sharply commands her to prepare immediately because he has already accepted the proposal on her behalf. Clenching her trembling hands in her lap, she bravely interrupts him to ask one final, desperate question. Staring intensely at the master and his silent wife, she finally asks about her mother. Her voice shaking with suppressed emotion, she demands to know what has become of the woman who was ripped away from her. Remaining perfectly calm, the master states that he will explain everything. Before he can speak, the madam furiously glares and spits out the name, Sutty, with pure venom. Losing her composure completely, the madam violently grabs her husband's arm and begs him to stop because she cannot bear this situation any longer. A concerned mother expresses her lingering worry as someone orders her and North to leave the room, assuring them Eliza will be fine. Looking at his anxious mother, North gently urges her to calm down. Stepping forward, the young man advises his father to follow the mother's instructions. Closing his eyes in resignation, the father quietly agrees to the request. Standing in the hallway, the older woman promises to call if anything happens. A sharp gaze shifts sideways, silently observing the tense departure. Eliza's eye trembles as the heavy, suffocating silence of the room sets in. The heavy door slams shut, leaving a seated Eliza completely alone with the imposing madam. Muttering under her breath, the madam expresses her sheer exasperation. She coldly complains about the others constantly meddling in unnecessary affairs. Clenching her fists, Eliza resolves to stay strong despite the terrifying nervousness of being alone with the madam. The madam commands her to come closer, making Eliza realize the absolute gravity of the moment. Bracing herself, the young girl realizes this is her first and final chance to learn the truth. Staring intently, the older woman asks if Eliza knows the ancient legend concerning the forest west of Luna. Nodding hesitantly, Eliza confirms she has read a few books about the subject. Placing her hand on a thick tome, the madam acknowledges her answer with a quiet murmur. The madam's gaze sharpens as she states that the tale is common knowledge to everyone in the territory. Opening the book, she explains that long ago, the forest was home to a mystical race capable of controlling human hearts. Dropping a massive revelation, the madam coldly declares that Eliza's mother, Mia, was actually a descendant of that very race. Shocked to her core, Eliza can only utter a breathless whisper of disbelief. Pacing near the window, the madam notes that everyone believed it was just a fairy tale until it actually manifested in reality. Her eyes narrowing with disgust, the madam accuses Mia of utilizing that dreadful power. Eliza recoils in absolute shock as she hears her mother deceived Lord Adal himself. The narrative shifts to the past, revealing that an enchanted Adal neglected his duties, raised taxes, and recklessly indulged in extravagance. The madam grips her sleeve tightly, her knuckles turning white from remembered fury. Shivering slightly, the madam recounts that a possessed Adal looked like a completely different person, giving her chills just remembering it. Turning back to the trembling girl, the madam prepares to deliver the final, crushing blow. With devastating finality, she brands Eliza as the daughter of a dangerous criminal who actively endangered the entire Luna family and its people. Devastated by the accusation, Eliza repeats the word in hollow, agonizing disbelief. Sneering with lingering malice, the madam begins to detail exactly what happened the moment her mother's true identity was finally exposed. The cruel woman brutally shatters Eliza's reality, claiming her mother abandoned her and fled the estate to escape punishment for her crimes. Looking down with a cold sneer, the madam calls the trembling girl pitiful for continuing to foolishly believe in the very mother who betrayed her. The oppressor steps forward, relentlessly driving the knife deeper by explicitly stating that Eliza was discarded. Heavy tears well up in Eliza's wide, disbelieving eyes as she stammers out a desperate denial of the heartbreaking accusation. The crushing weight of the devastating revelation causes the young girl to take a trembling step backward in absolute shock. Pressing her advantage, the madam informs Eliza that her future betrothed, Prince Rio, is a notoriously arrogant and cruel womanizer who has made many noble daughters suffer. The tormentor mocks Eliza's lack of magical abilities, noting that she could have easily bewitched the wicked prince if only she had inherited her mother's dark powers. Grabbing the girl's chin with a gloved hand, the woman sadistically points out that enduring hardship is Eliza's specialty anyway. Leaning in dangerously close, the madam commands Eliza to listen carefully, explicitly warning her never to return to this estate regardless of what happens in her new life. The cruel superior declares that the time has finally come for the criminal's useless daughter to serve a purpose for the family. She justifies this heartless manipulation by claiming that they graciously raised and educated Eliza despite her cursed lineage. The narrative abruptly shifts to the moonlit exterior of a grand estate, signaling a dark transition in the story. Meanwhile, a beautiful woman lounging in a lavish bed teasingly asks if the prince shouldn't be preparing for the imminent arrival of his new princess. Lying casually beside her with a book, the handsome prince dismissively replies that the new girl's arrival doesn't matter since she will inevitably leave soon anyway. The woman giggles and affectionately calls him a terrible man, to which he responds with a dark, knowing smirk. Suddenly snapping back to reality in the master's chambers, a cold voice acknowledges that Eliza is finally awake. Eliza looks up from her bed in a daze, her wide eyes reflecting a mixture of confusion and lingering fear. The imposing man standing before her formally introduces himself as Rio Elender, the absolute master of the castle. Utterly paralyzed by his sudden appearance, she can do nothing but stare at him in stunned, breathless silence. A flashback reveals a quiet scene from the early morning, showing a cloaked Eliza standing before her prepared departure carriage while the estate grounds remain completely empty. A servant informs her that everything is packed and they will arrive in Wilhelm tomorrow, prompting a solemn nod of understanding from the young woman. Before stepping inside, Eliza glances back over her shoulder one last time at the oppressive estate she has called home for years. Staring at the sprawling stone walls, she quietly admits to herself that she can barely believe she is actually leaving her lifelong prison so easily. A soft expression of mingled relief and lingering sorrow washes over her delicate features as she processes this monumental shift in her reality. Her thoughts drift back to the madam's mocking voice, sarcastically asking if it feels real that she is now officially recognized as the Lord's daughter and engaged to Prince Rio. Standing sternly in the study, the madam reminds Eliza that they only revealed this shocking truth so she would know how to behave properly as a legitimate daughter of the Luna family. Glaring with undisguised malice, the older woman threatens that Eliza's very life will be at stake if she does anything unnecessary to compromise them. Delivering one final, chilling warning, the madam states that Eliza will face absolute ruin if anyone ever discovers she is the daughter of a witch. Snapping back to the present inside the moving carriage, the haunting label of being a witch's daughter echoes endlessly in Eliza's troubled mind. Gazing blankly ahead, she reflects on the bitter irony of the dangerous accusation since she possesses absolutely no magical powers whatsoever. Sitting quietly in the rumbling carriage, Eliza stares out the window with a look of profound melancholy. Looking back at the distant estate, she notes that the mansion is already so far away. Though she feels no attachment to the estate itself, she realizes it is the only place left filled with precious memories of her mother. Clutching her dress tightly, she solemnly whispers her mother's name into the quiet carriage. Flashing back to a tense moment, she wonders if her mother truly committed a crime. Deep in her memories, the heartbroken girl questions if her mother genuinely abandoned her. Scrubbing laundry during her harsh servant days, she used to believe that as long as she stayed alive, she might find hope. She endured the painful isolation by clinging to the desperate dream that one day she might see her mother again. Tears streaming down her face, she admits that this fragile dream was her only remaining hope. Sobbing uncontrollably into her hands, she realizes that with her departure, she now has absolutely nothing left. Slumping forward in the empty carriage, the devastating weight of having nothing finally crushes her spirit. Swallowed by the darkness of her despair, she silently bids a final goodbye to the mother she lost. Pulling her hood up as the outside grows noisy, she wonders how long they have been traveling and if they have entered the town. Peering out with an empty expression, she deduces that they must be arriving at their final destination soon. Resigning herself to her fate, she concludes that no matter how terrible this new place is, it won't change her miserable reality. Just as she resolves to endure each day in absolute silence, a voice announces their arrival and the carriage door clicks open. Stepping out of the carriage, she cordially accepts the hand of a waiting guard to guide her down. She steps out to behold a breathtakingly grand castle illuminated by the glowing night sky and falling petals. Her eyes widen in pure astonishment as delicate flower petals drift down around her beautiful face. Leading her gently from the carriage, the guard formally welcomes her to the imposing Wilhelm Castle. The polite escort introduces himself as Jill and respectfully states that they have been eagerly expecting her arrival. Standing nervously before a line of waiting maids, she quietly introduces herself as Eliza Luna. A kind-faced older maid acknowledges her long journey and warmly invites the tired girl to follow her inside. Following her guide, she walks down a beautifully lit corridor lined with towering stone pillars. She marvels internally at the sprawling courtyard filled with blooming flowers and the towering, pure white castle walls. Utterly captivated by the magnificent sights, she cannot help but softly whisper how beautiful everything is. Her awe is suddenly interrupted when the head maid gently calls out her name to grab her attention. Turning her focus back, she is happily introduced to two younger maids named Levi and Maya who will be assisting her. The head maid kindly suggests she take her time to rest tonight and offers to immediately escort her to a prepared meal. Hesitating for a brief moment, Eliza timidly interrupts to ask for something else before they proceed. A polite servant steps forward and respectfully announces that she would like to formally greet Lord Rio. Apologizing softly, the maid informs Lady Eliza that His Highness has not yet returned for the day. Accepting this news with a quiet murmur, Eliza is told she may simply greet him the following morning instead. As the servant respectfully leads the way down the hall, Eliza wonders to herself what that strange reaction was all about. She clearly noticed how the air seemed to tense slightly the very moment she mentioned Prince Rio's name. A heavy doubt begins to sink in as she questions if the bad rumors surrounding him are actually true. Pushing her anxious thoughts aside, a lonely Eliza sits down at an incredibly lavish dining table overflowing with delicious food. Scooping up a delicate spoonful, she quietly brings the rich broth to her lips. A soft flush of comfort hits her as she happily notes that the meal is perfectly warm. Feeling deeply moved, she realizes it has been an incredibly long time since she had freshly made food. When an attentive maid asks if the main dish suits her taste, Eliza happily confirms that it is very delicious. Later, relaxing in a luxurious rose-filled tub, Eliza softly confirms that the bath temperature is perfectly to her liking. Marveling at the lovely scent, she curiously asks if the fragrance comes directly from the floating flowers. Pleased by her interest, the maid proudly explains that the beautiful flowers are grown right in the castle's garden. The attendant warmly encourages her to share her favorite scents for future baths and promises to care for her hair once she warms up. Overwhelmed by the gentle, attentive treatment, Eliza offers a soft, genuine whisper of thanks. While the maids cheerfully tend to her, Eliza reflects on how everyone here actually looks her in the eye and calls her name with a warm smile. Her gaze softens immensely as the profound warmth of simple human kindness finally washes over her. Night falls, revealing an incredibly grand canopy bed prepared just for her in the spacious guest quarters. Settling under the covers, she marvels at how nice it feels to rest in a bed so extraordinarily spacious and soft. She confesses to herself that she never expected to be welcomed like this, but a lingering doubt remains. The truth is, even though she came here as a consort candidate, everyone unnaturally avoided mentioning Lord Rio. Drawing on her past trauma, Eliza knows all too well the hollow look of people who have been completely silenced by fear. Despite her grim experiences, her instincts tell her that the atmosphere in this estate feels a little different. Staring up into the dark canopy, she nervously wonders what kind of person she is actually supposed to marry. Shifting in the heavy silence, she pulls the covers tighter as sleep finally begins to overtake her exhausted body. Hardening her resolve, she firmly decides it shouldn't matter to her no matter who this mysterious man turns out to be. The quiet peace is eventually broken as the early morning sunlight slowly filters through the tall bedroom curtains. A sudden movement nearby causes a tense hand to grip tightly against the pristine bedsheets. Waking in the slightly chilly morning air, she immediately notices a stark contrast from last night as the heavy scent of perfume and alcohol suddenly fills the room. Slowly blinking against the light, Eliza begins to stir from her uneasy slumber. Peeking out from beneath the heavy blankets, she sleepily asks if someone is in the room with her. Standing near the window with an indifferent expression, a handsome man dryly notes that she is finally awake. Eliza freezes in her bed, her eyes widening in sudden realization as she takes in the stranger's imposing presence. The silver-haired man bluntly introduces himself as Rio Elender, the absolute master of the castle. Completely caught off guard by her new lord's sudden appearance, she nervously stammers while trying to find her words. Suddenly, a rough hand grips her chin and tilts her face upward without a shred of gentleness. Staring down at her with undisguised contempt, Rio mockingly confirms that she must be the newest consort candidate. Before she can even utter her name, he coldly cuts her off and declares that introductions are entirely unnecessary. As Eliza struggles to comprehend that this hostile man is Lord Rio, he bluntly states that he has absolutely no interest in knowing who she is. The sheer hostility radiating from his harsh words causes her breath to hitch in sudden shock. Scanning his casual clothes and unkempt hair, she realizes he looks absolutely nothing like a regal prince. Instead of royal grace, his piercing eyes harbor a sharp gaze that aggressively rejects her very existence. His intense loathing completely overwhelms the quiet space between them. Leaning in closer, Rio venomously scoffs at the foolishness of a woman who would willingly walk into his estate. He ruthlessly mocks her for being so easily blinded by the prestigious title of consort. Pulling back slightly, he arrogantly proclaims that he will continue living his life exactly as he pleases. With a dismissive smirk, he grants her the cold permission to do whatever she likes as well. He icily concludes that as long as she fulfills her basic role, he couldn't care less about what else she does. Gripping her bedsheets tightly, a resigned Eliza quietly murmurs her understanding of his harsh terms. Lowering her gaze to hide the sting of his immediate rejection, she steels her resolve to survive this loveless arrangement. Looking back up with steady eyes, she formally promises to do exactly as His Highness wishes. Rather than being satisfied, Ryo narrows his eyes in immediate irritation at her submissive response. Glaring down at her, he furiously demands to know why she is using such a pathetic and unsettling tone. He sneers aggressively, accusing the terrified girl of attempting to shamelessly flatter him. Meeting his angry gaze without flinching, Eliza firmly denies having any such manipulative intentions. Turning on his heel to walk away, Ryo angrily dismisses whatever hidden scheme she used to arrive at his castle. Pausing near the door, he delivers a chilling promise that no matter what she tries, her future will never go the way she wants. Glancing back over his shoulder, he coldly invites her to leave immediately if she doesn't like his terms. Undeterred by his furious warnings, Eliza silently vows to fulfill her duty as a consort no matter the cost. Startled by the sudden gossip, Levi turns to Maya as they whisper in disbelief that Lord Ryo was actually in the new bride's room this morning. Frowning slightly in confusion, the two maids note that despite the scandalous encounter, Lady Eliza has remained exactly the same as always. Unaware of the whispering servants, Eliza sits peacefully on the sunlit balcony and takes a quiet sip of her morning tea. Transitioning to the Grand Library, Professor Jill formally instructs Eliza to examine a large textbook detailing the 3 major cities of the Elender Kingdom. Pointing to a detailed map, Jill explains that the royal capital Loria is ruled by the first Prince Jean, while the relay city Middlefair is governed by the second Prince Kyle. Smiling warmly, the professor concludes her geographic overview by introducing Wilhelm as a land deeply steeped in nature and tradition. After finishing the brief history lesson, Jill announces that Levi will be taking over to guide the young lady around the sprawling castle. Hesitating for a moment, Eliza politely interrupts to ask if she might borrow the heavy textbook to continue studying in her room. Surprised by her genuine dedication to learning, a soft smile stretches across the older woman's face. Nodding happily, Jill graciously grants her permission to take absolutely any of the books from the vast library whenever she pleases. Clutching the large tome to her chest, the young woman bows her head and offers her sincere thanks. Breaking the comfortable silence, the professor calls out Eliza's name with a hesitant expression. Choosing her words carefully, Jill awkwardly mentions hearing rumors about a morning conversation between Eliza and Lord Ryo. Offering a strained but hopeful smile, the older woman cautiously asks if the young couple managed to enjoy their time together. Lowering her gaze sadly, Eliza admits with a heavy heart that the meeting did not go well. Staring blankly at the floor, she bluntly confesses her belief that His Highness harbors a deep dislike for her. Apologizing quickly for prying, Jill promises to arrange a proper and more comfortable introduction for them another time. Pausing abruptly, Eliza gently interrupts the professor's apology to add a surprising counterpoint. Looking back up, she thoughtfully explains that instead of causing a commotion or shouting, the prince silently waited for her to wake up. Utterly taken aback by this revelation, Jill stammers in shock at the prince's unexpected display of patience. A faint, hopeful smile gracing her lips, Eliza confidently asserts that Lord Ryo is actually a remarkably kind person. Speechless, the seasoned professor stares softly at the young woman, deeply moved by her pure and forgiving perspective. Meanwhile, outside in the bustling courtyard, 2 armored knights chat idly near the grand entrance. Approaching his brooding friend, a sharply dressed young man named Yak casually wishes Ryo a good morning. Leaning in with a mocking grin, Yak notes the swirling rumors that Ryo's unwanted new fiancée still hasn't fled the castle. Exhausted by the relentless teasing, Ryo firmly orders his childhood friend to stop adding to the unnecessary fuss. Flipping casually through a dossier, Yak dismisses the delay as a mere matter of time while noting that Eliza Luna appears to be incredibly sheltered. Reading further into her origins, he remarks that her carefree nature likely stems from growing up in a heavily forested backwater territory far from high society's rumors. His eyes widening slightly at a scandalous detail, Yak discovers that Eliza is actually an illegitimate child who was hastily adopted into the main family after birth. Flashing a knowing smile, Yak teases the stoic prince that their surprisingly similar backgrounds might actually make them a perfect match. A blonde man stands firm, declaring he has absolutely no intention of marrying and refuses to be dragged around by his father anymore. A dark-haired man named Ryo sighs, reminding him that everyone knows he doesn't get along with His Majesty but questioning if it isn't enough already. Ryo warns him that quite a few people have followed him all the way from the capital out of pure worry. Holding out a document, Ryo urges him to look at it. Ryo pushes the document closer, suggesting that if he simply tries facing his fiancée once he might actually change his mind. Noting the irony of the timing, Ryo announces that they have arrived at the central plaza. The two men stop in their tracks as they spot a familiar blonde woman standing outside with a maid. The maid stammers a nervous greeting to His Highness while Eliza stares in silent shock. The blonde prince shoots them a cold, piercing glare. Maintaining her composure, Eliza politely greets His Highness and comments on the pleasant weather being perfect for training. The prince silently turns his head away in complete dismissal. Undeterred, Eliza asks if His Highness would like to have dinner together today. Ryo cries out in a panic as the prince abruptly walks away without a single word. A flustered maid makes a panicked sound as the awkward tension settles. Watching his retreating back, Eliza realizes that he completely ignored her. She deduces from his harsh morning behavior that he clearly wants to break off the engagement. Gently taking her hand, Ryo steps forward to address her. He earnestly begs Lady Eliza not to be too discouraged by the prince's coldness. Trying to soften the blow, Ryo explains that Lord Ryo has always acted like that toward every woman considered a potential bride. A warm, reassuring grip tightens around Eliza's hand. Startled but touched, Eliza quickly reassures him that it's not a problem at all. Changing the subject, she asks if he could take her to the apple tree she heard is in the garden. As Ryo happily agrees to lead the way, Eliza marvels at the strangely comforting feeling of having someone actually looking out for her. The branches of the apple tree rustle heavily under the weight of the ripe fruit. Gazing up at the tree, Eliza whispers in pure amazement. The maids explain that allowing the apples to fully ripen before picking makes them incredibly sweet, highlighting their large, red, and delicious appearance. A cheerful maid greets Lady Eliza and excitedly asks if she would like to try harvesting one herself. Guiding her hands, the maid praises Eliza's natural skill while showing her exactly how to hold it down. Eliza gazes softly at the perfect, shiny red apple she just picked. Smiling brightly, the maid promises Lady Eliza that tomorrow they will use it to bake an apple pie. A kind servant warmly surprises Eliza by offering her a beautiful handmade bouquet of freshly picked flowers. Eliza gazes softly at the vibrant blossoms as the kind staff warmly welcomes her to the city of Wilhelm. The surrounding maids cheerfully praise how perfectly the vibrant floral arrangement suits her delicate beauty. Touched by their genuine warmth and acceptance, Eliza lowers her eyes and softly expresses her heartfelt gratitude. Taking a deep breath, she marvels at how truly lovely everything is in her brand new environment. Looking out the tall window, she notes how the flowers, trees, and vast sky all shine with brilliant life. Standing on the sunlit balcony alongside her new maid, she gazes out at the peaceful kingdom sprawling below. Basking in the gentle breeze, she quietly admits to herself that this peaceful existence feels like a beautiful dream. Suddenly, Lord Ryo's harsh command for her to leave violently shatters her peaceful reverie. A drop of nervous sweat trails down her cheek as the grim reality of her unwanted status sets back in. Seeking a desperate distraction from her heavy thoughts, she turns her attention to a tall stack of leather-bound books. She busies herself by reading about how Wilhelm once flourished as a grand royal capital named after the first king. Eager to prove her worth in this hostile estate, she resolves to learn everything she can about the current capital. Gripping the heavy door frame, she desperately reminds herself that she must become a proper crown princess immediately. Staring blankly ahead, she silently acknowledges the painful truth that she has absolutely nowhere else to go. Her grim thoughts are abruptly interrupted by a cold voice mocking her and ordering her to stop wasting her pathetic efforts. Startled, she turns around to find a casually dressed Lord Ryo standing unexpectedly inside her private chambers. Catching her breath in sheer shock, she nervously stammers out a hesitant greeting to her imposing betrothed. She hurriedly apologizes for the mess while internally panicking over his completely unannounced return to her room. Snatching a heavy volume from her desk, Ryo expresses mock disbelief that she would willingly read about Wilhelm's boring history. Suddenly, his sharp gaze catches sight of a familiar cover hidden beneath the thick historical texts. Eliza lets out a soft gasp of nervous confusion as his arrogant expression falters for a brief second. Pulling out a worn children's fairy tale titled The Star-Lodging Tree, he dryly questions why she is reading such childish nonsense. Nervously clasping her hands, she explains that finding the exact book her mother once read to her brought a wave of nostalgia. Ryo coldly dismisses her rare sentimentality and bluntly suggests she return home if she misses it so much. Lowering her sorrowful eyes, Eliza quietly confesses that she was tragically separated from her birth mother as a young child. Refusing to let the dark memory consume her entirely, she takes a shaky breath and prepares to explain her true feelings. Looking back toward the towering bookshelves, she explains that spotting that specific fairy tale in the castle changed everything. She smiles softly, revealing that the storybook made her feel like the severed bond with her mother hadn't truly vanished. Meeting his cold gaze with rare, genuine warmth, she tenderly admits that discovering this lingering connection brought her true happiness. A heavy thud echoes through the quiet bedroom as a thick book is suddenly dropped onto the mattress. Annoyed by the disruption, Rio bluntly states that his mood is ruined and declares he is going to bed. Confused and anxious, Eliza watches him pull away and softly questions his sudden departure. Panic quickly sets in as she wonders if she has angered him again, fearing the consequences of his displeasure. Terrified of losing her only sanctuary, she realizes that she will be thrown out of the castle if she fails to please him. Reaching out desperately, she begs him to wait and catches the edge of his sleeve. Pausing in his tracks, Rio glances back over his shoulder with a quiet, unreadable expression. Gripping his clothes tightly, she steels her resolve to do whatever it takes to secure her place. Turning fully toward her, he casually offers to keep her company if she intends to rest. His piercing gaze softens slightly as he looks down at her small, trembling form. Looking up with determined eyes, she solemnly vows to fulfill her required role as his fiancée. She silently confesses to herself that she never expected to receive genuine love from anyone in this political marriage. Furthermore, she admits that she never believed she was capable of falling in love either. Standing as a pair bound only by circumstance, the emotional distance between them feels vast despite their physical proximity. Reaffirming her commitment, she firmly states that she will execute her duties as the princess consort. Narrowing his eyes, Rio repeats the word, duty, with a hint of quiet, probing skepticism. Her heart pounds nervously in her chest as he suddenly shifts closer, closing the distance between them. Leaning in intensely, he challengingly asks if she truly understands what fulfilling those marital duties actually entails. Flustered and defensive, she stammers that she has read about the physical obligations in books. Pushing her gently backward onto the bed, he decisively initiates the next step of their arrangement. Hovering intimately over her, he smirks and challenges the naive girl to take the lead if she is so prepared. His expression turns surprisingly gentle as his hand rests near her face, waiting patiently for her response. Murmuring a quiet apology to excuse her actions, she timidly reaches out to accept his challenge. Her trembling fingers hesitantly grasp the front fabric of his loose shirt. Fumbling awkwardly, she struggles to pull him closer in a clumsy, inexperienced attempt at intimacy. Embarrassed by her utter lack of grace, she lowers her gaze and quickly apologizes for her awkwardness. Ignoring her insecurities, his hand slides gently over her arm to take confident control of the situation. Capturing her lips, he pulls her into a deep, sudden kiss that elicits a soft gasp from her throat. She grips the heavy bedsheets tightly as the intense surge of physical intimacy overwhelms her senses. Pulling back slightly, he looks down at her vulnerable expression and softly notes that her entire body is trembling. Blushing deeply under his intense gaze, Eliza stubbornly insists she is fine and tells him to continue. Tears prick her eyes as the heavy weight of the situation finally begins to crush her resolve. Breaking the silence, she boldly declares that his actions are incredibly cruel. Trembling slightly, she confesses that she could never endure a completely loveless eternity. Pouring out her frustrations, she angrily reminds him of how harshly she was treated and abandoned upon her arrival. Refusing to back down, she demands to know why he would go to such humiliating lengths for a woman he doesn't even love. The prince pauses, the word love echoing strangely in the tense air between them. Looking down at her, he calmly points out that young noblewomen her age usually harbor romantic dreams even in political marriages. He falls completely silent as her next words catch him off guard. Staring back with tearful sincerity, she states plainly that she never once believed anyone would ever love her. She heartbreakingly admits that the very concept of falling in love was something she never even allowed herself to imagine. The prince's expression softens slightly as the raw honesty of her painful confession sinks in. A sudden flash of genuine surprise flickers across his handsome face. Abruptly breaking the physical contact, he steps back and gruffly orders her to put her clothes back on. Turning his head away, he coldly dismisses the encounter by claiming he only meant to intimidate her and has no interest in forcing a frightened woman. He casts one final, complicated glance over his shoulder before moving toward the exit. Leaving her confused, he sharply warns her to stop treating herself so poorly. He coldly adds that her complete lack of self-worth is incredibly unpleasant to watch. Clutching her clothes, Eliza can only murmur his title as his tall figure disappears from the room. The heavy bedroom door slams shut, leaving her sitting entirely alone on the large canopy bed. Still reeling from the sudden shift in his demeanor, she quietly acknowledges that he actually left without harming her. Gripping the dark fabric tightly, her mind races as she tries to process what just happened. A sudden realization dawns on her as she recognizes a distinct, familiar presence. She gently notes that a very specific scent was left behind in his wake. Looking toward the window, she realizes that the faint fragrance belongs to the very same flowers growing in the estate's garden. Meanwhile, a gentle breeze rustles the leaves outside the grand castle walls where two figures stand. Holding a cup in his hand, a serious Ryo turns his attention directly to the brooding prince. Ryo earnestly suggests that His Highness should try having dinner with Lady Eliza at least once. Making his stance perfectly clear, Ryo sternly warns the prince not to mistake his meddling for mere entertainment. Pointing out her diligent efforts, Ryo reminds the prince that Eliza has spent her entire first week studying her role and urges him to put in a little effort as well. A confidant teasingly asks Rain if he wants to get married as well. The aide honestly admits he doesn't care either way, respectfully vowing to support His Highness's ultimate decision instead. He warns that if the prince continues refusing, Kyle will use his extensive connections to indefinitely supply new candidates, suggesting it would be easier to just make a decision already. The handsome prince listens quietly as his companion frankly advises him to simply make the current engagement an official one at this point. Pressing the matter, the aide suggests that if Ryo refuses to speak with her personally, he should at least converse with someone close to her. The aide notes that since Lady Eliza is the very first candidate who didn't flee immediately, the entire castle staff seems unusually excited. Prince Ryo stands in solemn silence, his piercing gaze drifting downward as he deeply contemplates the heavy weight of his situation. The very concept of marriage echoes ominously in his mind as a lingering, unresolved burden. Walking through the sunlit corridors alongside his aide, Ryo quietly confesses that he never left the capital with the intention of finding a bride. A bitter memory surfaces of gossiping nobles whispering about how the emperor was swayed by an unknown beauty to sire Ryo, the illegitimate third prince. The faceless aristocrats continue their cruel murmurs, marveling at how the once loving royal couple's relationship had grown completely cold. A vision of a young, heartbroken Ryo reveals his deep inner turmoil, showing that his only true desire was to desperately escape that toxic environment. Snapping back to the present reality of his quiet estate, the adult prince turns his head with a lingering sense of melancholy. Shaking off the dark memories, Ryo abruptly changes the subject by thoughtfully noting a recent shift in the castle's atmosphere. He remarks to his companion that everyone in the estate seems unusually lively as of late. Catching the prince's subtle hint, the perceptive aide immediately asks if His Highness is inquiring about Lady Eliza. Meanwhile, an enthusiastic tutor cheerfully reports that Eliza is an incredibly diligent learner who will undoubtedly become a wonderful, supportive partner for the prince. Eager to prove her point, the tutor excitedly urges them to examine the young woman's truly exquisite embroidery work. Presenting the fine stitching, the older woman proudly declares that she has almost nothing left to teach Eliza in terms of technique, assuring Ryo that his future garments will be magnificent. Despite the glowing praise of her reserved yet kind nature, Ryo maintains a neutral expression as he listens to the staff's overwhelmingly positive reports. Suddenly, a young maid gasps in realization as she eagerly recalls a specific incident involving the new consort candidate. Blushing slightly, the maid shyly confesses that when she visited the guest chambers, the noble lady surprisingly helped her make the bed. The servant enthusiastically adds that Eliza was so incredibly skilled at the menial chore that it left her in a state of absolute shock. Another staff member quickly chimes in, completely agreeing that the young woman is exceptionally capable in everything she does. The maid hastily apologizes for allowing a noble to work, explaining that despite her protests, Lady Eliza simply insisted on being considerate. Showing a rare flicker of mild interest, Ryo softly dismisses the apology and prompts the staff to tell him what else he should know. Eager to share more, the maids excitedly lean in to recount yet another surprising tale about their unusual guest. They dramatically describe how a large spider suddenly appeared during tea time on the terrace, causing a massive commotion among the terrified staff. Instead of panicking like a typical noble, Eliza bravely grabbed a large broom to confront the eight-legged intruder herself. The starry-eyed maids cheer in pure adoration, endlessly thanking the incredibly cool Lady Eliza for safely catching the spider and releasing it far away. Observing her work, it is noted that she handles the broom with remarkable skill. A group of maids beams with joy, expressing how genuinely glad they are to have her there because she interacts with them as closely as His Highness does. Listening quietly, Prince Rio responds with a stoic acknowledgement of the situation. The head maid formally calls out the prince's name to get his attention. Sitting in front of the mirror, Rio coldly states he never agreed to anything as the head maid approaches to discuss Lady Eliza. The maid reports with concern that Lady Eliza brought very few dresses or jewels from her home, a fact she has already relayed to Master Jill. Hoping to remedy the situation, she urgently requests permission to call in a merchant soon. She implores the prince to have fine garments made for her, reminding him that she is destined to be his wife after all. Remaining impassive at his desk, Rio simply replies that he will consider the request. Reflecting on his schedule, he decides that today is the day he will finally meet Lady Eliza. Walking through the corridors, Rio ponders the fact that everyone seems to like Eliza Luna, yet he remains skeptical. He critically questions why her effortless broom-wielding, lack of dresses, and efficient bedmaking make something feel incredibly off. He contemplates her public image as a naive, sheltered noble lady. Analyzing the situation further, he firmly concludes that all these seemingly innocent details feel highly unnatural. Approaching a grand set of doors, Rio calls out to Ike to bring up the subject of Eliza Luna. Shocked by the sudden mention, Ike immediately asks in a panic if Rio is planning to force her out. Sweating nervously, Ike explains that while they previously framed broken engagements as the lady's choice, Rio flatly refusing her now would create immense trouble and urges him to at least acknowledge her presence. Shutting down the frantic warnings, Rio flatly demands to see the previous reports. Ike stares back at his friend with a look of mild surprise and lingering concern. Handing over the requested document, Ike admits that this sudden curiosity is entirely unexpected. Ike openly questions when Rio became so interested in her after having completely ignored her all this time. Rio's eye narrows slightly as he silently absorbs the challenging question. Flipping open the report, Rio dismissively claims he is not interested and that it is simply annoying how everyone else is making a fuss. Ike hums thoughtfully, clearly unconvinced by Rio's apathetic excuse. Smiling warmly as Rio reads, Ike notes that no one else has stayed this long before and points out that it is no surprise everyone likes Lady Eliza. Adding to his praise, Ike sincerely remarks that she is also beautiful. Keeping his eyes firmly on the open book, Rio offers a begrudging, quiet agreement. However, Rio continues his assessment by stating that she is an odd one with an unsettling aura. Ike's smile fades into a serious, thoughtful expression as he listens to Rio's sharp intuition. Concluding his deduction, Rio firmly admits that her strange behavior is exactly what bothers him. A man with light hair explains that they are currently conducting a thorough background check on Lady Eliza at Dr. Jill's request. Looking surprised and concerned, Rio questions the sudden need for a background check. The first man clarifies that while nothing specific happened, there are some concerning rumors circulating. Turning his head in profile, the man promises to report back as soon as they receive the results. With a slightly cold gaze, he bluntly states that the marriage will be called off if there is any problem. Eliza stares blankly ahead with a melancholic expression. Two smiling maids serve Eliza a large apple pie outside, noting this is the expected outcome. The scene shifts back to the men in uniform, showing Rio and another guard standing solemnly in the sunlight. Sitting alone at a desk, Eliza thoughtfully holds a quill over her open notebook. A maid politely interrupts, suggesting Lady Eliza take a short break with some freshly prepared tea. The maid presents a plate overflowing with delicious-looking cookies. The maids warmly present the trendy treats, prompting a small, grateful thank you from Eliza. A maid kindly offers to prepare them again next time while curiously asking what kind of treats Eliza usually enjoyed at her family home. Eliza softly admits she rarely had the opportunity to enjoy such treats because the Luna estate was so far from the city. The older maid sympathetically urges her to eat plenty now to make up for those lost opportunities. Feeling the weight of her secret, Eliza silently grasps her warm teacup tightly with both hands. Looking down with profound sadness, Eliza realizes what will happen if she continues to stay like this. Despite the maids warmly encouraging her to have more tea, Eliza secretly wonders if it's really okay to marry while hiding her dark truth. She reflects that just because she hasn't been driven out yet doesn't mean the engagement is officially decided. Her anxiety deepens as she realizes she hasn't been able to see Lord Ryo at all since that fateful day. Gathering her courage, she softly speaks up to break the silence. She hesitantly asks the attentive maids what His Highness is doing today. The maids apologize, admitting they are completely unaware of his current schedule. Eliza looks down as a heavy, melancholic silence falls over her. She quickly apologizes for causing the maids any unnecessary worry. The maids gently explain that while Prince Ryo is known for his free-spirited behavior, not all of the bad rumors about him are entirely true. The older maid affectionately adds that he is actually a kind master who always puts their work and livelihoods first. Showing Ryo kneeling before the former castle lord, they explain he must be under immense pressure after just inheriting the estate from his uncle. The maid kindly suggests it would be wonderful if Eliza could support him someday, leaving her stunned at the very idea of supporting someone like Lord Ryo. Sitting quietly with her tea, Eliza wistfully wishes that such a beautifully supportive future could actually happen. Eliza's troubled mind races as she solemnly asks herself a heavy question regarding her new life. She continues her internal monologue, desperately questioning what Lord Ryo truly thinks of her. Meanwhile, the silver-haired lord sits quietly at his desk, completely lost in his own complicated thoughts. A melancholic thought crosses Eliza's mind as she ponders what it would feel like to actually be loved by someone. Lying alone in her bed, she softly admits that she has never even imagined experiencing such a comforting reality. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the heavy wooden doors breaks the quiet atmosphere as a servant respectfully calls out for His Highness. The diligent aide bows his head and formally announces that he has come to report on the matter at hand. Later that evening, Eliza diligently counts out her steps as her instructor enthusiastically confirms she is doing a good job. The strict but kind instructor acknowledges her progress and suggests they go through the routine one last time before finishing for today. Looking slightly exhausted but relieved, Eliza expresses her gladness that she still remembers the steps despite it being a while since she last danced. As the gentle music plays, a wistful thought enters her mind, making her wonder if she will ever get the chance to dance with Lord Ryo to this melody. The watching maid suddenly gasps in pleasant shock and respectfully greets His Highness as he unexpectedly arrives at the door. Eliza blinks in pure astonishment, her wide eyes reflecting her sudden confusion as she turns toward the commotion. Stepping into the room, Lord Ryo is immediately questioned by the flustered maid about what business brings him to Lady Eliza's quarters. Ignoring the formalities, Ryo smoothly interrupts and politely asks if he might borrow her for a moment. Caught completely off guard by his highly unusual request, Eliza can only stare at him in silent bewilderment. Seizing the perfect opportunity, the delighted maid explains they were just about to dance their final song and boldly asks if the prince would partner with her. Eliza shrinks back slightly in the quiet room, completely convinced that the notoriously cold prince will immediately reject such a trivial invitation. To everyone's absolute shock, Ryo maintains a calm expression and readily agrees to the impromptu dance without a second thought. Eliza freezes in utter disbelief, her breath catching as the reality of his unexpected acceptance sets in. Watching his imposing figure approach, she frantically tells herself that she was absolutely certain he would refuse the offer. The sharp, rhythmic tap of his polished shoes echoes loudly across the floorboards as he smoothly closes the distance between them. As his large hand gently envelopes hers, her racing mind desperately demands to know why he is suddenly doing this. The handsome prince respectfully bows and takes her hand in the traditional starting position of a formal waltz. Looking up at his focused profile, Eliza cannot shake the overwhelming feeling that His Highness seems different tonight. A rosy blush creeps across her cheeks as she closely observes that he is somehow acting much different than his usual cold self. The quiet tension in the room thickens as the two prepare to begin their very first dance together, marking a profound shift in their dynamic. Ryo suddenly steps forward and pulls her into a breathtakingly close embrace, pressing his face dangerously near hers as they begin to move. Her heart hammering violently against her ribs, the deeply flustered Eliza forcefully commands herself not to get distracted by his intoxicating proximity. Sensing her rigid posture, Ryo leans in and softly murmurs for her to relax and follow his lead, promising there is no need to be nervous. Acknowledging the situation, Eliza quietly agrees to the arrangement. The two of them begin walking together side by side through the quiet halls. They continue their peaceful stroll in comfortable silence. Observing them closely, a bystander remarks on how perfectly the couple suits each other. Caught slightly off guard by the unexpected compliment, Eliza lets out a soft gasp. She realizes with quiet appreciation that Ryo is gently guiding her path through the crowds. He carefully leads the way to ensure she does not get lost in the sprawling estate. They walk shoulder to shoulder as she deeply reflects on her time spent in the household. She reflects warmly on how much she has learned during her surprisingly brief stay. Acknowledging Lord Ryo's well-respected status, she attributes the staff's overwhelming kindness to his influence. She ponders why a man of his high standing would treat her and the other potential brides so coldly. Her gaze slowly shifts upward as she searches his face for hidden answers. Deducing that there must be a secret reason for his behavior, she stares at him intently. Looking into his face, she wonders why his eyes always carry such profound and heavy loneliness. Suddenly, a sharp and unexpected wave of dizziness washes over her fragile body. Pausing abruptly in her tracks, she realizes something is terribly wrong with her balance. Her vision blurs violently as she begins to helplessly collapse toward the floor. Spotting her sudden fall, a panicked voice loudly calls out her name in shock. Someone rushes forward in severe alarm, frantically asking if the young lady is all right. Unable to steady herself, she feels the entire world spinning violently around her. Desperate to avoid causing trouble, she tries to force her failing body back up. Despite her fierce willpower, her physical strength completely abandons her in the crucial moment. Before she can hit the unforgiving ground, strong arms suddenly catch her falling form. Looking up in a stunned daze, she weakly whispers the prince's title as he safely holds her. Holding her securely, Ryo accurately guesses that she pushed herself too hard by reading late into the night again. Acting with absolute authority, Ryo immediately commands his staff to summon the physician to her room. Weakly protesting his unnecessary assistance, Eliza stubbornly insists she can walk under her own power. Scoffing at her foolish stubbornness, Ryo points out her deathly pale face and refuses to believe her obvious lie. Ordering her to stay quiet, he decisively scoops her into his arms to carry her himself. Without waiting for any further argument, the prince strides purposefully down the hall with Eliza safely locked in his firm grasp. Chapter 7. Agreeing softly, she finally yields to the situation. She observes his actions and marvels at how his gentle touch completely contradicts his harsh facial expressions. Feeling the warmth of his embrace, she finds comfort in the unexpected gentleness of his strong arms. A soft blush creeps across her face as she struggles to articulate her overwhelming feelings. Deep down she firmly decides that she wants to stay by his side and learn everything about Lord Ryo. Time passes quietly as she rests and regains her strength in the peaceful environment. Slowly fluttering her eyes open, she gradually awakens from her deep slumber. He stands near her bedside and gently asks how she is feeling after her long rest. As she attempts to rise and respectfully address him, he firmly instructs her to remain comfortably in bed. He explains that her exhaustion stems from overexerting herself in a new environment and assures her that a few days of rest will bring a full recovery. She sincerely thanks him for coming to her rescue while hesitantly preparing to ask a question. Brushing off her gratitude as nothing, his tone suddenly shifts to a much more serious note. Looking intently at her, he states that there is a crucial matter he must confirm before she goes back to sleep. He directly confronts her and demands to know why she intentionally hid the truth about her life in Luna. A heavy and anxious silence fills the room as the massive weight of his sudden confrontation settles upon her. Revealing his source of information, he announces that her comprehensive background report finally arrived today. Leaning in slightly, he prepares to lay out the undeniable facts he has just uncovered. Holding her gaze with absolute authority, he commands her to answer his forthcoming questions with complete honesty. Her heart drops as the terrifying realization of a thorough background investigation fully dawns on her. Confirming her deepest fears, he notes that the report indicates almost no one in the Luna territory actually knows who she is. He points out the glaring anomaly that the local citizens have never once laid eyes on their own lord's daughter. Outlining the deception, he explains how her family used rumors of illness to hide her while whispering about a forbidden servant locked in a tower. Staring directly into her eyes, he confidently deduces that she was in fact the hidden prisoner locked away from the world. He acknowledges the strict gag order placed upon the mansion's staff to keep the dark secret completely contained. Despite their absolute best efforts, he firmly states that keeping such a massive secret completely hidden was entirely impossible. Providing crucial context, he explains that fear of the legal wife and immense respect for the Lord's economic success kept everyone terrified into silence. Summarizing her tragic past, he concludes that as a concubine's child she earned the legal wife's intense hatred and grew up entirely oppressed. Realizing that he already knows absolutely everything, she quietly admits defeat and asks if he is certain there are no mistakes in the investigation. Yielding to the undeniable truth, she softly confirms his findings while resigning herself to the reality that her deepest secrets are now exposed. A lingering tension hangs heavily in the air as the full implications of her completely unmasked identity begin to take root. Standing over her, the dark presence coldly threatens that the marriage can be annulled and she will be sent back to Luna. Trembling at the thought, Eliza realizes the horrific fate waiting for her if she returns to that place. Recalling her abusive past, she knows that as a deemed useless person she will face a terrifying and likely fatal punishment upon her return. Gripped by absolute dread, she lowers her head as despair fully consumes her. Clutching herself in sorrow, she laments that the fleeting days of peace she recently experienced will never return. Breaking the heavy silence, Lord Rio sharply asks if returning is truly what she desires. Jolting in surprise, she looks up with wide and uncertain eyes. Confused by his sudden question, she stares at him blankly while struggling to process his intent. Stepping closer, Rio forcefully repeats his question to demand if she actually wants to go back to Luna. Stuttering helplessly, she struggles to form the words as panic constricts her throat. The cruel voices from her past suddenly echo in her mind and command her to know her place. Paralyzed by years of psychological torment, she mentally scolds herself for daring to harbor even a sliver of hope. Clenching her fists, she silently vows that she refuses to let anyone else suffer on her behalf ever again. Shaking off the shadows of her past, a sudden spark of defiance ignites within her fragile heart. Hearing her name called with such gentle respect brings the warm memories of the estate staff rushing back to her. Remembering the kindness and supportive words of the people who currently cherish her grants her newfound strength. Gathering her courage, she finally raises her eyes to meet the prince's intense gaze. Frowning at her hesitation, Rio presses her once more for a definitive answer. Taking a trembling breath, she firmly decides that she wants to believe in this new life. Speaking her true desire aloud, she clearly states her wish to remain right where she is. Rejecting her former prison, she tearfully admits that there is absolutely no place for her in that cruel mansion anymore. Tears welling in her eyes, she collapses to her knees as the emotional dam finally breaks. Sobbing openly on the floor, she confesses that she truly has nowhere else to go. Begging with raw desperation, she pleads to be allowed to stay in any capacity whatsoever. Bowing her head in complete vulnerability, she finishes her desperate plea to stay at the estate. Looking down at the weeping girl, Rio absorbs the full weight of her heartbreaking confession. Breaking the tense silence with a softer tone, the prince gently commands her to lift her face. Delivering the ultimate verdict, he formally declares that she may stay if that is her true wish. Stunned into silence by his merciful decree, Eliza looks up with fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. Reassuring her shattered heart, Rio firmly promises that her past mistreatment holds no power in his domain. The prince reassures Eliza that his promised support for Luna will continue without interruption. He gently commands her to stop worrying and finally get some much-needed rest. Overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness, Eliza calls out to His Highness in quiet disbelief. She stares at his retreating back while silently wondering why he is going out of his way to help her. Turning back slightly, Rio explains that the entire castle was thrown into an absolute uproar upon hearing of her sudden collapse. He firmly reminds her that everyone in the sprawling estate truly needs her presence. Urging her to recover quickly, he instructs her to show her healthy face to the worried staff soon. Suddenly sensing another presence lingering in the room, Rio accurately calls out to the hidden Jill. Realizing he has been spotted, Jill steps out of the shadows as Rio smoothly leaves the rest of Eliza's care in his capable hands. Bowing respectfully, the dutiful servant immediately accepts the prince's orders without a hint of hesitation. Jill politely addresses Lady Eliza while thanking the prince for his absolute trust. A brief, quiet moment settles over the dimly lit room as the prince officially takes his leave. Turning his full attention back to Eliza, Jill sincerely apologizes for conducting a thorough background investigation on her without seeking prior consent. Understanding the absolute necessity of his actions, Eliza gently reassures him that such precautions are completely natural when they concern Lord Rio's safety. Acknowledging the hardships revealed in her past, Jill sympathetically states that it must have been a painful journey and fiercely promises their unwavering support from now on. Deeply moved by his comforting words, Eliza bursts into silent tears of relief as he softly urges her to finally rest assured. Changing the subject slightly, Jill mentions that there is actually one specific thing he sincerely wants to thank her for. Catching her completely off guard, Eliza points to herself in sheer confusion as she questions why he would ever need to express gratitude toward her. A soft, nostalgic expression crosses Jill's aging face as he explains that he has faithfully stood by His Highness's side ever since the prince was just a helpless baby. Admitting his highly presumptuous feelings, the elderly servant confesses that he has always loved Rio dearly as if the boy were his very own son. Jill sadly reveals that despite the prince's own reckless behavior, it has always deeply pained his heart to watch his beloved master's public reputation suffer so terribly. Recalling a specific and touching conversation, Jill reflects on the exact day when Eliza firmly defended the prince by calling him a genuinely kind person. Smiling warmly at the precious memory, Jill admits that hearing her earnest defense made him truly and profoundly happy. The heavy emotional weight of his heartfelt confession lingers peacefully in the quiet morning air. Sometime later, a cheerful maid enters the brightened room to greet the recovering Lady Eliza with a warm morning welcome. The servant happily informs her that a massive pile of new get-well gifts has arrived for her today. Expressing her humble gratitude, Eliza gracefully accepts the situation as the maid finds a perfect spot to place the beautiful bouquet of flowers. Feeling deeply guilty for causing everyone so much unnecessary worry, Eliza hesitantly asks if she is well enough to go out and personally greet the staff this afternoon. The maid enthusiastically agrees that everyone would be delighted to see her but gently warns the young lady not to push her fragile body too hard. Adding a final teasing remark, the maid notes that His Highness must be quite concerned as well, given how he constantly looked like he wanted to say something whenever they passed by him in the halls. A cheerful attendant tells Lady Eliza that if the prince is truly concerned he should just come visit her personally. Eliza humbly replies that simply being allowed to stay at the estate is enough since she knows he is a very busy person. Pausing mid-thought, the attendant begins to bring up another interesting observation regarding His Highness. Eliza internally panics about the disastrous consequences if they discover she is the witch's daughter while noting that the prince surprisingly never mentioned it. She quietly wonders if that dark secret was somehow missing from the thorough investigation report or if he actually already knew. Continuing her anxious train of thought, she considers the staggering possibility that he knew everything and still actively chose to trust her. Lost in her doubts, she questions the reality of the terrifying rumors and wonders if the magical power to control hearts actually exists. Catching sight of something unexpected, she realizes she has no immediate way to uncover the truth right now. Finding an unfamiliar item among her belongings, she asks Levi if he remembers who delivered the strange book. The attendant curiously leans in and asks what kind of book she has just discovered. Examining the beautiful cover, Eliza reveals it is a classic fairy tale titled The Boat of the Starry Sea. Her eyes light up as she happily realizes that this particular story is the highly anticipated sequel to The Starlit Tree. Overwhelmed by a wave of gentle nostalgia, she gazes down at the precious book with a soft smile. Elsewhere in the estate, Dr. Jill approaches the prince and casually remarks that it is good to see Lady Eliza recovering so well. The doctor bluntly presses the prince on whether he asked Eliza about the troubling rumors regarding the witch's daughter and her mother's unknown whereabouts. Unfazed by the dark rumors, the prince raises a skeptical eyebrow and asks if the doctor actually believes such ridiculous tales. The doctor quickly denies believing them while brushing the rumors off as a jealous wife's delusions but insists he simply likes to confirm the facts. The prince demands an immediate end to the ridiculous jokes about Eliza allegedly using magic to control him and take over Wilhelm. Rio bitterly states that even if she successfully aimed for him, it would not affect the country in the slightest, which prompts a deeply concerned look from Rain. Rain firmly scolds the prince and begs him to stop belittling himself since he is their rightful and respected ruler. Stepping smoothly into the tense conversation, Dr. Jill completely agrees with Rain and reinforces the loyal sentiment. Using Rio's own harsh words against him, the doctor points out that treating himself poorly is incredibly unpleasant to watch. Recognizing the profound irony of the spoken statement, the humbled prince quietly concedes that they are right. A familiar voice suddenly calls out to His Highness from across the wide corridor. Dr. Jill looks up with a pleasant smile and warmly welcomes the completely unexpected arrival. Greeting Eliza, the doctor expresses his sincere gladness at her swift recovery while she politely bows and thanks him. Eliza nervously approaches the gathered group and asks if the prince is too busy for a quick private conversation. The doctor warmly assures her that they have just finished their chat and enthusiastically encourages her to speak with Rio. Excusing themselves to give the pair some much-needed privacy, the doctor and Rain tactfully decide to take a walk around the estate. Left entirely alone in the quiet hallway, the prince turns his silent and attentive gaze toward the waiting Lady Eliza. Breaking the silence, Lord Rio invites Eliza into the room and gently suggests that she take a seat. Taking her seat with a respectful nod, Eliza affirms his request as he expresses his deep concern over whether she should really be out of bed in her fragile condition. Brushing off her own discomfort, she eagerly explains that she simply wanted to rush over and sincerely thank him for the wonderful book he sent. Caught off guard by her intense gratitude over such a simple gesture, the prince looks at her with utter confusion and asks what exactly she means. Realizing the gravity of her own secret, she shyly admits that she has only ever discussed that specific novel with one person. Revealing the depth of her realization, she clarifies that His Highness was the sole individual she ever spoke to about her favorite story. Struck by her heartfelt confession, Rio gazes back at her in stunned silence as the true meaning of his gift finally sinks in. Quickly regaining his stoic composure, he scolds her lightly for risking her health just to deliver a thank you and commands her to rest properly until she fully recovers. Unfazed by his gentle reprimand, a warm smile blooms on her face as she confesses that the unexpected gift simply made her incredibly happy. Mesmerized by her radiant joy, Rio watches her blushing face with a softening expression as the tension leaves the room. Hesitating for a brief moment, the prince awkwardly attempts to explain his own reasoning behind choosing that particular book for her. Opening up about his own past, he reveals that his mother used to read that very same story to him quite often when he was young. Continuing his rare moment of vulnerability, he admits that hearing Eliza talk so passionately about the tale had strongly reminded him of his late mother. Absorbing this deeply personal revelation, Eliza softly acknowledges his words with quiet, empathetic understanding. A heavy yet comforting silence settles between them as the shared intimacy of the fragile moment draws them closer together. Shattering the quiet atmosphere with sudden resolve, Rio speaks her name with an intense and unwavering seriousness. Looking directly into her eyes, he firmly declares his intention to officially enter into an engagement with her. Completely paralyzed by the abrupt proposal, Eliza's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as the weight of his monumental words crashes over her. Refusing to let the moment slip away, the prince leans in and directly asks if she will accept his hand in marriage. His powerful declaration echoes continuously in her mind as she desperately tries to process the sudden, life-altering turn of events. Ringing in her ears, his blunt question demands an immediate answer while she grapples with the surreal reality of the situation. Staring intently at the floor, she frantically wrestles with her own swirling emotions and deep-seated insecurities regarding her worth. Gathering every ounce of courage she possesses, she finally lifts her head and softly but resolutely agrees to become his fiancé. Locking eyes with her newly confirmed partner, a silent current of profound understanding passes between the engaged couple. Still reeling from the shock, she mutters that she never expected someone with her suspicious background to be accepted so easily. Bowing her head in deep respect, she formally expresses her profound gratitude for His Highness's generous proposal despite her precarious standing. Unable to suppress her lingering doubts, she bravely questions if he is truly certain about this massive decision. Explaining her confusion, she reveals her prior assumption that he had absolutely no intention of marrying anyone regardless of their status. Seeking the absolute truth, she boldly asks what exactly caused such a drastic shift in his previously unyielding stance on marriage. Standing firm under her questioning gaze, Lord Rio prepares to reveal the genuine feelings hidden beneath his stoic exterior. Pausing thoughtfully, Rio begins to confess his inner turmoil. He reveals that he originally volunteered to become the Lord of Wilhelm simply to live freely and far away from the royal family. Continuing his explanation, he admits he never had any intention of acting like royalty or marrying for political gain. He explains his naive belief that no one would complain as long as he fulfilled his duties and protected the people's livelihood. Shifting his intense gaze toward Eliza, he notes that everything changed after she arrived. He confesses that her presence made him realize how solidifying his royal position would bring far more joy to his people than he ever imagined. Finding sudden purpose, he declares that their marriage holds true meaning if it allows him to repay those who support him. Leaning in slightly, he admits there is a specific reason he can now accept his royal fate so honestly. Looking directly into her eyes, he tenderly reveals that she is the sole reason for his newfound acceptance. Utterly stunned by his heartfelt confession, Eliza points to herself in sheer disbelief. Smiling warmly, Rio confirms her shock with a single, resolute word. He affectionately declares that meeting her completely changed his guarded heart. Sometime later, Rio gathers the entire castle staff and demands their absolute attention. The loyal staff stands in eager silence as they wait for their lord's highly anticipated announcement. Standing proudly beside his bride, Rio officially announces his formal engagement to Eliza de Luna. He firmly commands his people to continue supporting her as the new lady of the castle. Erupting into joyous applause, the staff cheers and enthusiastically shouts their heartfelt congratulations. Stepping forward, the head servant respectfully offers his own sincere congratulations to His Highness. The aide promptly suggests holding a public engagement announcement for the citizens of Wilhelm as soon as possible. Nodding in agreement, Rio calmly orders his staff to proceed with the grand preparations. Turning his attention away from the bustling staff, Rio calls out softly to his new fiancée. He politely invites her to join him for dinner later, promising to send someone to escort her. Blushing under his gentle gaze, Eliza looks up at him while processing the intimate invitation. She eagerly accepts the offer aloud while silently marveling at the surreal reality of dining with His Highness. Determined not to miss the opportunity, she firmly promises that she will absolutely be there. Later that evening, the two sit closely together at a small, elegantly arranged table to share their meal. An apologetic servant interrupts to express regret for not preparing the lord's lavish private dining room for their shared dinner. Dismissing the apology, Rio waves off the formality and insists that this intimate arrangement is perfectly fine from now on. He openly admits that he prefers sitting closely together because it makes conversing much easier. Justifying his choice, the prince chuckles while complaining that the grand dining hall is far too large and its table absurdly big. Acknowledging the situation, he firmly nods and confirms his absolute understanding. Breaking the silence, she hesitantly asks if they will be sharing dinner together from now on. He confirms their shared meals and promises to notify her on the specific days he is unavailable. Interrupting their quiet moment, the dedicated attendants approach the table to address both His Highness and Lady Eliza. Presenting a beautifully arranged cake decorated with intricate sugar flowers, they announce it as a small celebration in her honor. Noting the elaborate dessert, he glances over and curiously asks if she enjoys eating sweets. Her eyes widen in absolute delight at the sight of the exquisite and unexpected treat. Flashing a bright and radiant smile, she sincerely thanks the staff for their incredibly thoughtful gift. Leaning in slightly, she closely examines the delicate craftsmanship of the edible decorations. Studying the sweet petals, she begins to point out a highly familiar detail about the sugar flowers. He calmly confirms her observation when she realizes the sugar decorations perfectly match the real flowers scattered around the castle gardens. She finally understands why she never saw them in Luna after he explains that the specific flower only blooms in the royal capital and Wilhelm. Gazing at the delicate confection with a soft smile, she reveals that it happens to be her absolute favorite flower. He stares at her quietly for a moment and softly acknowledges her innocent confession. Taking a delicate bite of the cake, she happily declares that the dessert is incredibly delicious. Meanwhile, bustling preparations and lively chatter echo through the busy corridors of the estate. Showering her with praise, the enthusiastic tailor requests that she try on 3 more elegant dresses. Sweating nervously, she seeks clarification that this specific gown is only for the engagement announcement rather than the actual wedding. The attendants cheerfully assure her that the official wedding dress is currently being prepared with far greater care across multiple regions. Feeling utterly overwhelmed by the grand celebration, she listens in awe as they discuss various options for the post-ceremony party. Clenching her hands tightly, she vows to do her absolute best to meet everyone's high expectations. Handing over a dense document, Levi politely asks her to carefully review the complete guest list before the upcoming ceremony. Dedicating herself to her studies, she meticulously reviews the historical records concerning past ceremonies held within the kingdom of Elender. Praising her hard work, Levi happily informs Eliza that her demanding schedule will be much more relaxed this afternoon. Suddenly remembering a crucial detail, Levi excitedly announces that she will personally accompany Eliza to the royal capital for the wedding announcement. Eliza politely notes that the upcoming trip will be especially exciting since Levi's own family resides in the capital. Explaining her background, Levi reveals she was born in the capital and previously worked at Loria Castle alongside her sister before coming to Wilhelm. Lowering her gaze, Eliza somewhat sadly admits that she has never actually visited the royal capital even once in her life. Encouraging her to look forward to the journey, Levi enthusiastically describes the thriving city and the imposing grandeur of Loria Castle. Reflecting on her intense past, Levi notes that the capital's strict regulations and rigid dress codes constantly kept her on her toes every single day. Reflecting on her surroundings, Eliza notes that she personally favors this place the most because of how wonderfully relaxed Wilhelm feels. She reassures herself that the king and queen are kind people who will surely welcome her warmly. A nervous thought crosses her mind as she wonders what it will be like to formally greet their majesties. Pondering their strained connection, she wonders if she will ever actually hear about the capital and his family directly from Ryo himself, since they have hardly spent time together since the engagement. Looking over a list of ceremonial flowers while noting how perfectly a certain color would match her dress, she admits to herself that there are still so many things she desperately wants to know. Acknowledging the late hour and praising the staff for their hard work, she silently hopes that she might at least catch a glimpse of his face even if they cannot speak. Wandering through the quiet halls of the estate, she takes slow, deliberate steps in the dim evening light. Suddenly, a familiar voice cuts through the heavy silence by bluntly pointing out that she is late. Startled by the unexpected presence in the dark, Eliza gasps in surprise and respectfully addresses His Highness. Recovering from her initial shock, she asks if he has already returned, to which Ryo smoothly confirms that his earlier plans had changed. Wasting absolutely no time, the prince extends a sudden invitation and asks if she will accompany him for a short while. Eager to spend precious time with him, she immediately accepts his unexpected offer without hesitation. Guiding her through the darkened estate, he gently warns her to watch her step as their shoes click softly against the floorboards. Stepping out into the open terrace, Eliza gasps in pure astonishment at the breathtaking sight unfolding before her. A sweeping, magnificent panorama of the glittering city and the vast, starry night sky stretches endlessly across the horizon. Utterly captivated by the gorgeous scenery, she whispers in sheer awe that the view is absolutely beautiful. Standing closely beside her, Ryo calmly explains that this specific balcony is the best place in the entire estate to gaze at the stars. Unable to tear her eyes away, she confesses that she has never seen a night view before and finds the glowing combination of stars and city lights truly breathtaking. Pleased by her genuine reaction, Ryo offers to personally show her around the bustling town tomorrow if she would like that. Thrilled by the unexpected proposition, Eliza eagerly asks if he really means it, prompting him to softly call her name. Breaking his usual stoic and distant demeanor, the prince sincerely apologizes for the harsh way he treated her in the past. Hesitating slightly, he admits his deep uncertainty over whether she will actually enjoy spending time with him now after everything that has happened. Touched by his rare vulnerability, Eliza steps closer to bridge the physical and emotional gap between them. Looking up at him with gentle affection in her eyes, she silently reassures him of her true, unwavering feelings. Shifting her attention to a nearby bloom, she reveals that the delicate plant before them is called the Rio Eolender flower. Smiling fondly, she points out that the center of its softly colored petals perfectly matches the unique, beautiful shade of His Highness's eyes. Demonstrating her thoughtful knowledge, she mentions that this specific breed of flower was originally gifted during the very year he was born. Caught completely off guard by her touching observation and genuine interest, Ryo lets out a soft gasp of realization. Blushing slightly under his gaze, Eliza confesses that knowing its deep connection to him has made her love the beautiful flower even more. Wrapping up their heartfelt, intimate conversation, she beams brightly and declares that she is eagerly looking forward to their town excursion tomorrow. Processing the quiet realization, he softly acknowledges her words. Feeling the evening chill setting in, he gently suggests they head back inside soon. Hesitating for a moment, she shyly asks if they can stay together. Pleading softly, she requests just a little more time by his side. A quiet moment stretches between them as the atmosphere grows increasingly intimate. Drawing closer, their unspoken connection deepens in the tranquil silence. Amused by the situation, he lightly remarks that Levi will probably scold him later for staying out. Pressing against him, she marvels at the comforting warmth radiating off his body. Wrapping her closely, he agrees to stay until she is satisfied as she eagerly asks if they can talk more tomorrow. A wave of profound hope washes over her as she realizes she can finally look forward to tomorrow coming. Basking in the gentle embrace, she closes her eyes to cherish the rare peace. Overwhelmed by the unfamiliar joy, she silently questions if it is truly okay for her to be this happy. The scene transitions gracefully to reveal a serene and contemplative morning. Sunlight bathes the quiet estate as a sense of calm settles over the grounds. Reflecting on her newly discovered feelings, she admits she has grown to love the delicate flower even more. Shattering the tranquility, a frantic servant drops to his knees in deep apology to His Highness. Panicking over a mistake caused by a newly hired gardener, the servant promises to immediately remove the forbidden flowers placed near the prince's room. Raising a hand to stop the frantic apologies, Ryo calmly declares there is no need to remove them. Granting unexpected permission, he instructs the staff to display the blooms however they like from now on. Looking slightly embarrassed, he softly apologizes for ever making them worry about his preferences. The staff watches in stunned silence as they process the prince's remarkable change in attitude. Observing the situation from afar, his aide happily notes that the engagement seems to have positively changed his heart despite his secret trips into town. Joining the conversation, another companion points out that Lady Eliza seems to deeply admire Ryo as well. Scoffing slightly, the pragmatic aide suggests her feelings are rooted in sheer gratitude for not being sent away rather than true admiration. Dismissing the cynical view, the companion argues that such gratitude is a perfectly fine foundation for their relationship. Pausing dramatically, the companion shifts the focus back to the prince's own evolving emotions. Probing for the truth, he boldly asks Ryo if he feels something special for her as well. Deflecting the question with a stoic expression, Ryo stubbornly insists he only intends to treat her as a wife purely out of obligation to their engagement. Unconvinced by his denial, the companion chuckles and notes that Prince Kyle will surely be surprised when he learns of these developments. Smirking in anticipation, the aide reveals he already sent the report letter first thing this morning and is eagerly awaiting the royal reaction. Standing his ground, he confidently declares that he refuses to blindly follow the royal family's orders and will carve his own path. Acknowledging his resolve, his companion simply accepts his bold intentions. Reminding him of his obligations, the companion mentions his waiting fiancée and tells him to enjoy the day. He turns away in silence as he prepares to depart for his scheduled meeting. Taking a deep breath, he steps out into the crisp air. A cheerful voice calls out from behind, wishing him a wonderful time on his outing. He calmly approaches the stable area where his majestic ride awaits. Lost in thought, he internally admits his confusion over how drastically his feelings have changed. Breaking his concentration, Eliza politely asks if the magnificent steed belongs to His Highness, to which he simply agrees. Gazing at her, he reflects on the fact that he had never even considered marriage before. As Eliza openly admires the horse's beautiful white coat, he realizes he has been thinking about her constantly since the day they met. He marvels at her resilience, remembering how she still wanted to stay despite his initial cold treatment. He silently confesses that while sympathy played a role in his proposal, there is a much deeper reason. Staring intently at her, he suddenly realizes that Ike's earlier observations were completely correct. A gentle wave of realization washes over him before he even fully comprehends it. He finally admits to himself that Eliza has slowly become someone incredibly special to him. They set off together on horseback toward the bustling town. Arriving at their destination, they are immediately greeted by the lively sounds of a crowded street. Eliza marvels at the vibrant atmosphere as he proudly introduces the bustling central market. Turning toward her, he curiously asks if she has ever visited a town or market before. She hesitates as painful memories surface, recalling how she was strictly forbidden from leaving her family's mansion. Mustering a faint smile, she explains that she once visited a town with her father when she was very little. Looking down sadly, she quietly admits that the memory is faded and she hardly remembers the experience. Listening intently to her melancholic story, he softly acknowledges her past. Reaching out decisively, he makes a move to change the gloomy atmosphere. He smoothly suggests they buy something while they are here and asks if she has anything specific in mind. Completely caught off guard by the generous offer, she stammers in wide-eyed confusion. Amused by her flustered reaction, he cheerfully declares that he will just have to pick something out himself. He steps forward enthusiastically into the bustling marketplace to browse the colorful stalls. Smiling warmly, he decides it would be a wonderful idea to pick up a souvenir for everyone waiting back home. Arriving at the bustling commercial district, the couple begins their highly anticipated excursion by stepping into a stylish boutique. Guiding her through the shop named Glend Letter, Ryo gently instructs Eliza to turn around. Confused but fully trusting his lead, she softly agrees and turns her back toward him. Stepping closer, the prince carefully fastens a beautiful and glittering necklace around her neck. Admiring his handiwork, Ryo proudly declares that the elegant jewelry suits her perfectly just as he had anticipated. Turning to the shopkeeper without a hint of hesitation, he decisively purchases the exquisite accessory. Overwhelmed by the sudden and generous gift, Eliza breathlessly murmurs his royal title in pure shock. Bowing her head with deep gratitude, she vows to treasure the precious gift for the rest of her life. Caught entirely off guard by her intense sincerity, Ryo freezes while his cheeks flush a bright shade of red. Quickly looking away to hide his sudden embarrassment, he weakly mutters that she is heavily exaggerating the simple gesture. Continuing their romantic stroll side by side, a comfortable yet slightly bashful silence settles between the newly engaged couple. Suddenly, a curious voice calls out from the nearby crowd as a sharp-eyed passerby spots the familiar royal figure. Recognizing the prince immediately, a shocked townsman loudly asks if the mysterious woman walking beside him is his companion. Smoothly introducing Eliza as his fiancée, Ryo reveals their upcoming official announcement and leaves the townsman absolutely flabbergasted. Recovering from the massive shock, the excited citizen loudly shouts his congratulations while trying to keep up with their brisk pace. Drawing a massive crowd, another ecstatic local rejoices at the unbelievable sight of their beloved prince finally finding a bride. Spreading the monumental news like wildfire, a woman joyfully announces to the entire street that Lord Ryo has officially gotten engaged. Surrounded by an ocean of cheering citizens, the couple is instantly showered with endless and enthusiastic congratulations from every possible direction. Observing the massive commotion unfolding around them, Eliza smiles warmly and admits she is glad to see the townsfolk so incredibly happy. Slipping away from the overwhelming mob, the couple quickly navigates through the winding alleyways to find some much-needed privacy. The joyous echoes of congratulations continue to ring out softly in the distance as they finally manage to escape the chaos. Finding a secluded spot away from the bustling main road, they share a quiet and lingering glance of relief. Catching his breath, Ryo turns his attention toward a cozy and inviting building situated just up ahead. Stepping into the charming establishment, they are immediately greeted by the warm and comforting atmosphere of a local eatery. Settling into their seats, Ryo gently apologizes for the delay by noting that greeting the overly excited townsfolk took much longer than expected. Reassuring him immediately, Eliza explains that she was truly delighted to meet the wonderful people who personally work alongside His Highness. Leaning in with genuine enthusiasm, she excitedly recounts the fascinating stories she heard about his tireless efforts to rebuild roads and distribute quality goods to the capital. Smiling softly at his unwavering dedication, she notes how incredibly proud all the citizens seemed of their hard-working prince. As their massive feast finally arrives, Eliza marvels at the delicious spread while Ryo confidently guarantees the exceptional taste of every single dish. Taking his first bite, the prince happily confesses that while his royal chef is absolutely top-tier, he still secretly craves the comforting flavor of this specific local shop. A lively woman excitedly calls out to Ryo the moment he arrives. Welcoming him back, she playfully notes that it has been so long she thought he was never returning. Ryo casually brushes off her teasing by explaining he has just been busy lately, though she sounds highly skeptical. Teasing him further, she slyly questions if he was secretly giving his attention to another shopgirl. Gesturing to his companion, she points out that he even brought a remarkably cute girl with him today. Completely unfazed, Ryo firmly introduces Eliza as his official fiancée. The shopgirl freezes in absolute shock as the weight of his declaration sinks in. Staring in disbelief, she stammers out a question to confirm if Eliza is truly Ryo's fiancée, which he quickly affirms. The realization hits the woman as she frantically asks if the recent rumors were actually true. Quickly changing her tone, the flustered shopkeeper stutters an apology and respectfully tells Lady Eliza to take her time. Ryo groans about the noisy woman as she scurries off to eagerly gossip with everyone else. Standing quietly beside him, Eliza averts her gaze with a troubled expression. A heavy silence falls between them as she tightly grips her clothes in lingering discomfort. Attempting to address the tension, Ryo gently calls her name, but she quickly interrupts to say she does not mind. She humbly reminds him that she is merely someone saved by His Highness and trails off thoughtfully. Rationalizing the situation, she bluntly states that having mistresses or concubines is not unusual for a man of his status. Looking away, she declares that she has no intention of interfering with his personal actions even after their marriage. Ryo stares back at her in stunned silence, clearly wounded by her detached and purely transactional view of their relationship. Recovering his composure, he firmly suggests they go somewhere else once they finish eating. Instructing her to wait, he turns away to fetch the horse while she quietly agrees. Left completely alone on the bustling street, Eliza stands in somber isolation. She sighs internally, deeply regretting how awkward the mood has become during this incredibly rare outing. Her thoughts drift back to the cheerful shopkeeper who seemed far too familiar with Lord Ryo. Clenching her hands tightly against her chest, she struggles to suppress an unexpected surge of jealousy. Reminding herself of her blessings, she acknowledges that she has officially gotten engaged and even received a lovely gift from him. Berating her own turbulent emotions, she wonders when she became so greedy when her current situation should be more than enough. Suddenly, an unknown voice violently shatters her thoughts by asking if she is the one marrying His Highness. Startled by the hostile tone, Eliza sharply turns her head to confront the sudden intrusion. She comes face to face with a fiercely glaring woman staring her down. Shock washes over Eliza as she immediately recognizes the hostile figure as the same woman she spotted at the market earlier that morning. Introducing herself formally, Eliza politely confirms her name. A harsh voice immediately cuts her off and violently demands she spare the phony greetings. Startled by the sudden hostility, she gasps in pure shock. A disdainful woman glares back at her with a highly mocking smirk. The bitter stranger coldly congratulates Eliza for playing her cards so well. Heavy tension thickens the air as the woman fiercely stares her down. Confused and deeply intimidated, Eliza nervously asks for the stranger's identity. The woman scoffs dismissively, claiming Eliza wouldn't even bother remembering her name. Sneering with utter contempt, the stranger expresses her deep pity for Ryo. She explains her sheer disappointment, having fully expected him to choose a bride from among Wilhelm's commoners. Mocking the prince's situation, she claims he just wanted freedom from royal obligations instead of a forced political marriage. Trying to defend herself, Eliza stammers that while she isn't from Wilhelm, there is more to the story. The furious woman sharply commands Eliza to remain entirely silent. She aggressively questions what a pampered noble lady who has never known hardship could possibly understand about their struggles. Lunging forward with sudden malice, the woman aggressively reaches out toward Eliza. The attacker specifically targets the delicate necklace resting upon Eliza's chest. Panicking as hands grab her, Eliza desperately begs the woman to stop the violent assault. Ripping the jewelry away, the woman cruelly claims it holds absolutely no real value to someone like Eliza. With a swift and vindictive motion, the stranger ruthlessly hurls the precious necklace away. The beautiful heirloom plunges straight into the dark water with the resounding splash. Staring in absolute horror, Eliza realizes His Highness's irreplaceable gift is rapidly sinking. As the sinking jewel faintly catches the sunlight, the woman viciously predicts that Ryo will eventually abandon her too. Noting the sparkling reflection deep in the water, the woman advises Eliza to leave before humiliating herself any further. Refusing to give up, Eliza spots the glimmer and realizes she can still find exactly where the necklace landed. Acting entirely on desperate impulse, Eliza urgently climbs over the stone railing right toward the deep water. Ignoring the woman's sudden shock, Eliza pushes forward because she desperately needs to hurry. A panicked onlooker screams out a warning as Eliza plunges toward the dangerous current to retrieve the sinking treasure before it sweeps away. Completely losing her balance, Eliza tumbles headfirst over the edge into the rushing water below. A massive splash erupts as her sudden plunge instantly sends the surrounding bystanders into a blind panic. Drawn rapidly by the chaotic scene, Ryo suddenly arrives on the balcony and demands to know the cause of the wild commotion. Hearing someone cry out and abruptly apologize, Eliza suddenly loses her balance. Watching her plunge into the abyss, Ryo screams her name in absolute horror. Submerged in the freezing depths, she begins to slowly sink beneath the water's surface. Reaching out desperately into the murky darkness, she realizes the water isn't as deep as she feared and pushes forward. Grasping blindly through the swirling current, her fingers finally brush against a small solid object. Closing her hand firmly, she successfully secures the lost item within her tight grip. Kicking fiercely off the muddy bottom, she propels herself upward toward the shimmering surface. Breaking through the water with a massive splash, she desperately gasps for precious air. Catching her breath, a wave of profound relief washes over her as she whispers her thanks to the heavens. Paddling clumsily to the stone edge, she drags her soaked and heavy body completely out of the water. Shivering violently from the freezing cold, she kneels on the ground while water drips heavily from her clothes. Suddenly a frantic voice echoes from the nearby pathway as the prince loudly calls out her name. Racing toward her shivering form, Rio skids to a breathless halt as he takes in her thoroughly drenched state. Staring at her soaked figure in sheer disbelief, the furious prince demands to know what on earth she was thinking. Bowing her head in deep shame, Eliza instantly offers a terrible apology for her incredibly reckless actions. Explaining her dangerous dive, she reveals that she had carelessly dropped her precious necklace into the deep water. Processing her absurd excuse, Rio gazes down at her with a messy combination of boiling anger and sheer relief. Scolding her harshly, he yells at her not to be so completely ridiculous over a replaceable piece of jewelry. Startled by his fierce and unexpected outburst, Eliza shrinks back slightly under his intense glare. Opening her hand to reveal the retrieved item, she cheerfully apologizes for worrying him while claiming the necklace is perfectly safe. Looking down at her outstretched palm, Rio's sharp eyes immediately spot a highly suspicious detail. The delicate metal chain of the beautiful necklace hangs completely severed and violently broken. Furious at her obvious lie, the prince points out that the heavily torn chain proves she didn't simply drop the jewelry. Flinching at his sharp deduction, she freezes as he sternly demands to know the actual truth of what transpired. A heavy and incredibly tense silence falls between them as her fragile false story completely crumbles under his scrutiny. Shifting the intense conversation away from her obvious lie, Rio firmly announces that there is something important he needs to discuss. Hesitant and highly nervous, she softly murmurs his title while mentally bracing herself for his upcoming words. Cutting off any further interruptions, he authoritatively commands her to stay silent and let him speak his piece. Standing tall in the dim evening light, the resolute prince prepares to lay all his buried feelings bare. Staring directly into her widened eyes, he brings up his highly anticipated answer regarding their earlier conversation. Staring with unyielding determination, she firmly declares that she will not leave Wilhelm under any circumstances. She vows that no matter what trials await them, she fully intends to remain faithfully by Lord Rio's side. Acknowledging the difficult path ahead, she admits that she knows their journey together will not be easy. Embracing her new role as his wife, she earnestly promises to keep working hard until everyone finally accepts her. The intense emotional weight of her bold declaration hangs heavily in the quiet air between them. Suddenly pulled from her lingering thoughts, she lets out a soft gasp of surprise. A sudden, unexpected movement draws her immediate attention as the atmosphere shifts abruptly. Breaking the tension, Rio gently warns her that she will catch a cold if she does not change out of her wet clothes before prompting her to leave. Yielding to his caring suggestion, she quietly agrees to follow his lead without hesitation. The scene shifts smoothly as they arrive at a warm and welcoming inn to seek shelter from the harsh elements. An attentive innkeeper warmly addresses Lady Eliza while guiding her to a freshly prepared change of clothes. Expressing her deep gratitude, Eliza profusely apologizes for arriving unannounced while thanking the staff for their immense kindness. Brushing off her apologies, the cheerful innkeeper explains that Lord Rio is actually a frequent and valued guest at their establishment. Piqued by this unexpected revelation, Eliza curiously asks if His Highness visits the inn often. A brief, thoughtful pause settles over the cozy room as the innkeeper happily considers her response. The innkeeper enthusiastically confirms his frequent visits but notes with a dramatic gasp that this is the very first time he has ever brought a lady with him. Flustered by the revealing answer, Eliza quickly stammers an embarrassed apology for asking such a strange and probing question. Smiling warmly, the innkeeper reassures her and expresses genuine relief at seeing Lord Rio so clearly loved by someone. The heavy, unexpected word echoes loudly in Eliza's mind as she quietly reflects on the complex concept of love. Looking downward, she internally confesses the undeniable truth that she has indeed developed deep romantic feelings for Lord Rio. Despite her growing affection, she sharply reprimands herself by admitting that hoping for anything more between them would be entirely presumptuous. Lost in her own melancholic thoughts, she solemnly stares into the distance while wrestling with her complicated status. She sadly reminds herself that a person of her lowly origins was already shown immense kindness simply by being allowed to stay near His Highness. Returning to the present, she finally announces her presence to Ryo while apologizing for keeping him waiting. Noticeably surprised by his complete lack of response, she softly calls out his noble title into the quiet room. Approaching his location quietly, she discovers the exhausted prince resting peacefully with his eyes closed. She leans in closer, tenderly observing the undeniable signs of deep fatigue etched across his sleeping face. Struck by a sudden pang of guilt, she realizes he pushed through his own intense exhaustion just to bring her into town today. Overwhelmed by his silent sacrifices, she trails off while silently cursing her own selfish insecurities and doubts. Stirring awake from his brief slumber, Ryo groggily opens his heavy eyes and sleepily asks if she has finally returned. Returning to his side, she gently declines his offer to rest a little longer. A quiet moment passes between them as they simply look at each other in the tranquil silence. He softly asks what is wrong while noting that she looks visibly downcast. Looking away hesitantly, she quietly denies that anything is bothering her. She finally admits that she feels terrible for causing him so much trouble today. Surprised by her confession, he openly admits that he was actually thinking the exact same thing. He laments that despite wanting her to have a good time, he only ended up causing her sadness instead. Pushing back against his sudden self-blame, she quickly urges him not to say such things. Staring into his eyes, she earnestly assures him that she had a truly wonderful time today. She adds that simply sitting and talking with him like this means the absolute world to her. Reflecting on his own stubborn past, he confesses that for the longest time he refused to listen to anyone else. He gazes at her affectionately and reveals how easily he can now accept her gentle words. Closing the distance between them, he finally utters the 3 profound words of love. Reaffirming his deep emotions, he sincerely admits that he has completely fallen in love with her. Overwhelmed by his sudden romantic confession, she stares back at him in stunned silence. Tears immediately well up in her eyes as the heavy weight of his genuine affection fully sinks in. Gathering her courage, she tearfully stammers that she feels the exact same way. Breaking through her lingering insecurities, she wholeheartedly confesses her own growing feelings for His Highness. Gently reaching out, he softly touches her tear-stained face in a highly intimate embrace. The two draw closely together as they prepare to share a deeply emotional kiss. They lock lips in a tender and passionate kiss that officially seals their newfound mutual love. Lingering in the warm embrace, they savor the quiet tranquility of their beautiful shared moment. Pulling away slightly, they rest their foreheads together in a state of absolute romantic bliss. Meanwhile, the peaceful atmosphere drastically shifts somewhere else entirely within the bustling castle walls. An attendant abruptly interrupts the quiet corridors to frantically call out for Lord Ike. Handing over a sealed document, the messenger announces an urgent letter meant specifically for His Highness from a neighboring country. Frowning at the completely unexpected delivery, Ike remarks on how incredibly rare such a correspondence is. A sudden shock visibly crosses Ike's face as he closely examines the heavy royal seal upon the envelope. Reading the sender's details, Ike discovers the letter is a direct report from Chancellor Lumen Sol of the Lucius Kingdom regarding Eliza Luna's mother. The ominous contents hang in the air as the massive revelation threatens to disrupt the newly formed peace. Reflecting on his origins, Ryo reveals that he was the mysterious baby his father, King Landon Elender, brought back from an unknown place. Refusing to elaborate further, the king stubbornly claimed the child was his own and that the mother had already passed away. Despite causing a massive uproar and days of intense discussion, the infant was eventually accepted as the third prince. The shocking revelation shook the court precisely because the king had always loved Queen Selma with absolute faithfulness. Those closest to the monarch found it incredibly difficult to believe that he had secretly kept a mistress. The sudden betrayal immediately created a painful and lasting rift between the once loving royal couple. While still a very young boy, Ryo was bluntly informed that the queen was not his actual birth mother. Having already overheard malicious rumors and sensed the cold treatment from others, the young prince had instinctively suspected the truth all along. The agonizing realization that he didn't truly belong in the royal family inflicted a deep emotional wound on the child. Cutting through the surrounding darkness, his father firmly called out his name. Looking down at the boy with warmth, the king declared unconditionally that Ryo was his precious son. Through all the turmoil and royal drama, his father remained an ever-present source of unwavering kindness. Breaking from the heavy memories, A cheerful voice suddenly called out the young prince's name. Inviting him to join their excursion, his older sibling excitedly announced they were going horseback riding together. Thrilled by the inclusive invitation, little Ryo eagerly shouted his desire to tag along. Embracing him fully without prejudice, both of his older brothers genuinely loved and treated him as their true little brother. Peeking nervously around a corner, the young boy hesitantly sought out the queen. Bowing apologetically, the maid Jill explained to Lady Selma that young Master Ryo had fiercely insisted on sleeping in her room. Waving off the apology with a gentle smile, the queen warmly welcomed the little boy into her arms. Snuggling into her soft embrace, his younger self felt the deeply comforting warmth of her gentle acceptance. During those innocent and formative years, the young prince constantly sought out the queen's presence. Driven by a hidden anxiety, he desperately needed to see if she would still offer him a genuine, loving smile. Reflecting on those bittersweet memories, the older Ryo realizes he must have subconsciously sensed the underlying tension brewing beneath the surface. Praising his exceptional physical prowess, a servant cheerfully remarked that his swordsmanship teacher considered him the most talented student. Marveling at his sharp intellect, another caretaker praised him for successfully reading such difficult books at such a young age. Continuing the endless stream of compliments, the staff expressed their constant amazement at young Master Ryo's rapid and impressive growth. Confused by the overwhelming praise, the boy turned hesitantly toward his loyal maid Jill. Staring critically at his own reflection, Ryo painfully acknowledged that his physical appearance resembled absolutely no one in the royal family. Realizing the cruel irony of his existence, he understood that every time he earned top marks, malicious gossip about his father's mistress would instantly resurface in high society. Carrying the heavy burden of his lineage, the prince tragically learned that his own success directly caused the queen unimaginable pain. Holding the young boy close, a comforting voice reassures him that he is completely free to live however he wants without worrying about such heavy burdens. Taking those warm words to heart, young Ryo quietly reflects on his isolating and complicated childhood. Remembering the painful past, he recalls how his mother's fragile health forced her to convalesce at a garden villa, meaning his parents only ever saw each other at official functions. Suddenly, the quiet memory is interrupted when a small, hard object clatters loudly onto the ground nearby. A passing servant frantically bows and apologizes to His Highness after accidentally dropping a polished stone from her pocket. Admiring the beautiful stone as he hands it back, Ryo learns from the grateful servant that the object is actually a special charm given by her daughter. Intrigued by the concept, the young prince curiously asks the servant to explain more about the mysterious charm. The servant eagerly explains that each gemstone holds a specific meaning and gifting them to a special someone is currently a very popular trend. Staring thoughtfully at the little trinket, Ryo silently absorbs this fascinating new piece of information. Expressing his bright gratitude to the servant, he quickly runs off with a wonderful new idea forming in his young mind. Retreating to his private room, the young prince carefully and meticulously ties a delicate string around a radiant gemstone. Holding up his finished handiwork, Ryo proudly declares that his homemade charm is completely ready. Gazing softly at the crafted necklace, he wonders nervously if his mother will actually like his heartfelt gift. Gripping the precious stone tightly in his small hands, he channels all his desperate, loving hopes into the charm. Closing his eyes, he earnestly prays that the magical gemstone will finally help his ailing mother recover her failing health. Arriving eagerly at the garden villa, his hopes are quickly dashed when a maid apologetically blocks the door and informs him that Lady Selma is currently resting. Masking his deep disappointment, the obedient prince simply nods and promises to return the following day. Stepping away from her closed quarters, he glances back longingly at his mother's quiet room. Sighing softly to himself in the empty hallway, he laments not being able to give her the healing charm right away. Suddenly struck by a brilliant idea, his eyes widen with renewed and vibrant excitement. Planning a wonderful surprise, he joyfully decides to have a servant sneak the charm directly onto her pillow while she sleeps. Rushing back toward the room, he is abruptly frozen in place by the terrifying sound of shattering objects and a distressed scream. Peeking anxiously around the corner, Ryo worriedly whispers his mother's name into the heavy, tense silence. A maid desperately tries to comfort the frantic Lady Selma as the noblewoman wildly cries out that she cannot endure this situation anymore. Weeping uncontrollably, Lady Selma apologizes to her staff while sobbing that the emotional burden has finally become too much to bear. Clutching her chest in absolute agony, She confesses that looking at Ryo constantly forces her to envision the face of a woman she has never known. Sobbing bitterly, she reveals that the boy's very existence serves as a constant, torturous reminder that Landon shattered his sacred vows to her. Questioning her cruel fate, she cries out in anguish over why her husband ever brought his illegitimate child into the royal family. Breaking down completely, she tearfully laments how this ultimate betrayal has twisted her heart enough to genuinely hate an entirely innocent child. Standing paralyzed in the shadowy hallway, young Ryo listens in absolute horror as his entire world utterly shatters around him. The furious woman menacingly questions if he truly intends to make her wish he had never been born. A concerned observer desperately questions why Lady Selma would suddenly resort to such an unusually cruel treatment. Gasping in sudden shock, a young boy stares wide-eyed as the terrifying confrontation rapidly unfolds. Panting heavily, the terrified boy struggles to catch his breath as absolute panic begins to set in. Losing his footing completely, he flails his arms wildly as he slips backward toward the treacherous ledge. A sharp cry forcefully escapes his lips as he tumbles helplessly over the edge. Plunging violently into the freezing depths, he becomes entirely submerged in a chaotic burst of bubbles and darkness. Thrusting a desperate hand toward the fading surface light, he fights valiantly against the suffocating underwater current. Gasping for air that simply isn't there, he slowly loses his grueling battle against the churning river. Letting out a weak groan, he finally succumbs to the overwhelming exhaustion threatening to drag him under permanently. Snapping back to the present, Ryo bitterly recalls seeing the lost gem glowing at the riverbed but admits he completely lacked the willpower to retrieve it. He solemnly explains to his father that the mysterious glow permanently vanished a few days later when the river waters aggressively rose during a storm. Staring intensely at his father, Ryo forcefully demands to know the absolute truth about the woman who actually gave birth to him. Fueled by years of suppressed anger, he furiously questions the older man about his true motivations for bringing him to the royal castle. Looking away with profound regret, his father firmly states that he cannot reveal that closely guarded secret even to his own son. Utterly frustrated by the impenetrable wall of silence, Ryo angrily screams to know why the truth must continuously remain hidden. Offering only a quiet and pained apology, his father gently pleads for his desperate son to simply understand the impossible situation. Refusing to back down, Ryo sharply accuses his father of being entirely unfair by continuously hiding reality from the people who deserve it most. Gesturing passionately, he points out that the Queen Mother is currently suffering immense emotional agony because of this endless web of deception. He presses further by emphasizing that his brothers are also bearing the crushing weight of their deeply fractured family. Softening his voice slightly, he sorrowfully admits that his siblings are incredibly lonely in this cold and unforgiving environment. He tragically realizes aloud that his father is also suffering profoundly simply because he never stopped loving the Queen Mother. Overcome by a suffocating dark wave of self-loathing, Ryo mutters that his mere existence is the absolute root cause of everyone's pain. Clenching his fists in sheer despair, he tearfully declares that everything would have been significantly better if he had never even existed. Reflecting on the grim aftermath of that crushing day, Ryo explains that he officially stopped trying to act like a proper prince. He reveals that his growing rebellion led him to completely ignore royal rules and frequently sneak out disguised among the commoners by age 14. Desperate to permanently escape the suffocating capital, he proudly recounts how he volunteered to become the Lord of Wilhelm a year ago with his uncle and brother's quiet support. Overwhelmed by the tragic depth of his heartbreaking past, Eliza allows tears of deep empathy to stream freely down her face. Reaching out with unexpected and tender gentleness, he warmly cups her tear-stained cheek in the palm of his hand. Smiling softly at her overwhelming compassion, he gently wipes away her tears and assures Eliza that there is absolutely no need to cry. Brushing off the heavy memories, Ryo firmly declares that all of his past suffering is finally behind him. Looking up at him with deep empathy, Eliza softly murmurs his royal title as she processes his painful childhood. Acknowledging the depth of his trauma, she gently notes that healing such profound emotional wounds will undoubtedly be difficult. Leaning in closer, she earnestly asks him to let her stay by his side whenever the sadness threatens to overwhelm him. Touched by her unselfish compassion, Ryo points out that she must have endured a massive amount of hardship herself. Brushing off his concern, Eliza reassures him that she feels entirely at ease now while he marvels at her incredible ability to remain so sincere toward others. Seeking to understand her pure heart, The prince asks if she holds any resentment toward the mother who left her behind. Shaking her head with absolute certainty, she firmly denies feeling any anger toward her absent parent. Explaining her true feelings, she reveals that holding on to the desperate dream of reuniting with her mother became her sole focus after she disappeared. Smiling softly at the bittersweet memories, she confesses that the sheer thought of her mother's love carried her through the absolute darkest days of her life. Bringing her thoughts back to the present, she joyfully notes that holding on to hope eventually led her to meet him and the wonderful people of Wilhelm. Dropping her gaze slightly, she admits the sad reality that she may never uncover the complete truth behind her mother's disappearance. Clasping her hands together with renewed conviction, she proudly declares that this uncertainty is exactly why she chooses to fiercely believe in her cherished memories. Looking up with a bright and unwavering smile, she affirms her absolute faith in the mother who genuinely loved her. Struck by her incredible resilience and pure devotion, Rio softly acknowledges her words as a profound understanding washes over him. Noting the late hour, the prince admits that spending time with her constantly opens his eyes to so many new and wonderful realizations. Pulling her into a gentle embrace, he softly requests to stay perfectly still like this for just a little while longer. Sometime later, the couple returns to the estate and is immediately greeted by the warm and familiar voices of the staff. Addressing her with utmost respect, the royal attendants welcome Lady Eliza back to the safety of the mansion. Eager to share her joy, Eliza cheerfully announces that she brought back plenty of souvenirs, only for a serious voice to interrupt and say they have urgent news to share. Stepping out from the shadows, a trusted advisor reveals they have been anxiously waiting for both of them to return. Dropping an absolute bombshell, the advisor dramatically announces that they have finally located the long-lost mother of Lady Eliza. Stunned into total silence by the miraculous revelation, the young woman freezes in her tracks. Elaborating on the shocking discovery, the aide explains that an official letter arrived for Rio directly from the steward of the Lucius Kingdom. Confirming the precise location, the advisor states that her mother is currently residing safely within the borders of the neighboring Lucius Kingdom. Barely able to breathe, Eliza gasps her mother's name as a tidal wave of sheer disbelief crashes over her. Frantically seeking confirmation, she asks if this unbelievable piece of information is actually true. Nodding with absolute certainty, the aide confirms that the detailed information within the letter leaves very little room for doubt. Delivering the most crucial detail of all, the advisor reveals that her mother desperately wishes to reunite with Lady Eliza. Overwhelmed by the life-changing news, Eliza tearfully repeats the message before Rio urgently demands to see the letter immediately. Reflecting on the difficulty of their exhaustive search, someone marvels that the missing woman was hiding in the neighboring kingdom all along. Asking for Rio's perspective, a companion suggests that she likely decided to flee the country because of the turbulent past events in Luna. Reviewing the gathered intelligence documents, Rio confirms that the information indisputably proves the woman is indeed Eliza's mother. Turning his focused attention to his fiancée, Rio gently asks Eliza to confirm the findings for herself. Reaching out with trembling hands, Eliza carefully takes the rustling papers to read them. Her eyes scan the handwritten investigation report detailing the discovery. Overwhelmed by the life-changing contents, she stares intently at the paper as the heavy truth finally sinks in. Noticing her frozen state, Rio softly calls out her name in genuine concern. Clutching the document tightly against her chest, she confidently declares that there is no mistake. Tears welling in her eyes, she softly whispers her mother's name in pure, overwhelming disbelief. Wasting no time, Rio sharply commands Ake to immediately arrange for the steward Wilhelm's extended stay. Addressing Eliza cautiously, Rio admits he doesn't want to offer false hope by speaking too hastily about the situation. Meeting her gaze with unwavering determination, he promises to do absolutely everything in his power to ensure they can finally reunite. Deeply moved by his resolute vow, she nods quietly in tearful agreement. The scene shifts away as the heavy emotional atmosphere settles into a quiet, focused resolve. Reflecting on the hasty diplomatic developments, someone worries about the forceful approach while warmly commending the day's hard work. Discussing the political nuances, a companion reveals that Eliza's mother personally requested the Lucius Kingdom's help to arrange a direct meeting. Highlighting the highly unusual circumstances, the aide notes how strange it is for the steward to come negotiate personally. Narrowing his eyes suspiciously, he concludes that the neighboring kingdom almost certainly harbors another hidden motive for this swift action. Standing firm against potential political threats, Rio declares he will accept any non-extreme conditions simply to ensure things proceed according to Eliza's wishes. Observing the prince's intense dedication, the companion chuckles and remarks that he hasn't seen Rio make such a serious face in a long time. Smirking knowingly at his friend, the 8 points out that Lady Eliza must have become truly important to him. Rio averts his gaze momentarily while processing the undeniable truth of his own deeply rooted feelings. Breaking the lingering silence, Rio straightforwardly admits his deep affection with a single confident word. Highly amused by the honest confession, his friend laughs softly and notes that Rio has finally admitted it aloud. The scene transitions back to Eliza's quarters, where a cheerful maid excitedly brings up the topic of her long-lost mother. The maid explains how His Highness moved things forward after her mother reached out, sympathetically noting their tragic separation at such a young age. Continuing the joyful explanation, the maid reveals that a highly important envoy from the neighboring kingdom will officially arrive tomorrow. Dente warmly congratulates Lady Eliza on the wonderful news while gracefully accepting her heartfelt gratitude. Clasping her hands in pure delight, the maid joyfully anticipates that her mother will now be able to attend the grand wedding just in time. Planning for the future, the speaker declares they must show Wilhelm their utmost hospitality upon his arrival. A quiet moment of anticipation settles over the silent room. Anticipating the next day, she realizes she will finally uncover the long-awaited truth about her mother. Tossing and turning in the quiet darkness, she admits she cannot sleep well. She wonders what kind of life her mother has lived during the 10 long years they have been apart. Recalling the contents of a message, she notes that her mother explicitly wished to meet her. A deep sense of longing washes over her as she desperately wants to see her mother soon. Gazing into the distance, she quietly wonders if her mother will actually attend the upcoming wedding. Overwhelmed by the sudden influx of good fortune, she admits she still cannot quite believe it all. A warm wave of pure happiness completely envelopes her racing heart. However, she cautiously confesses that having so much joy arrive all at once almost feels a little scary. The quiet stillness of the night heavily emphasizes her anxious and swirling thoughts. Meanwhile, a sudden knock at the door is followed by a servant formally excusing himself to His Highness. The attendant respectfully announces that Lady Eliza has arrived for a late-night visit. The prince looks up in quiet surprise at the completely unexpected announcement. She apologizes for coming so late, but he immediately reassures her not to worry about it. Noticing her restless demeanor, he accurately guesses that she cannot sleep, which she softly confirms. Leaning forward attentively, he earnestly asks if there is anything he can do to help her. Clutching her clothes nervously, she asks if they could just talk for a little while. Calling her name gently, he captures her full and immediate attention. With a warm and inviting tone, he softly commands her to come closer to him. She quietly steps forward and bridges the intimate distance between them. Looking directly into her eyes, he urges her not to hold back and promises she can tell him absolutely anything. A brief moment of vulnerable silence passes as she gathers her remaining courage. Blushing deeply, she addresses him and tentatively begins to make her highly unusual request. Mustering all her bravery, she shockingly asks if she may sleep beside him for the night. Completely taken aback by the bold question, he freezes in pure astonishment. Flustered by his reaction, she frantically clarifies that she simply thought being by his side would help her feel calm. Processing her innocent explanation, he softens his expression and calmly states that he understands her intentions. A gentle smile graces his face as he warmly reassures her that he does not mind her request at all. Dismissing her concerns about the cramped bed, Rio notes that the vast room actually feels much more natural when they are pressed close together. Shifting the topic entirely, he casually instructs a bewildered Eliza to finally stop speaking to him so formally. When she nervously stammers out his royal title in protest, he points out that such stiff formalities will be incredibly strange once they are married. Cutting off her protests completely, he firmly demands that she use his actual name instead of calling him Your Highness. Amused by her deeply flustered reaction, he gently teases that seeing her pout like that is a refreshing first for him. Blushing deeply under his affectionate gaze, she struggles to find the right words to respond to his sudden teasing. Captivated by her changing expressions, he softly remarks that she has never smiled at him like that before while she nervously breathes his royal title again. Refusing to let her retreat behind walls of formality, he gently but firmly corrects her by stating his given name. Yielding to his persistent request, she nervously stutters out his name with a slight honorific attached. Not quite satisfied with her hesitant attempt, he softly urges her to try saying it just one more time. Gazing up into his eyes, she finally breathes his name with genuine warmth and deep affection. Pulling her tightly against his chest, he deepens the romantic embrace as their bodies press flush together. Overwhelmed by the intense physical contact, Eliza realizes that her entire body is suddenly burning with an unfamiliar heat. Her mind races with sheer confusion as she wonders why this intense wave of desire is completely taking over her senses. Mentally scolding herself, she remembers that she was the one who initially asked to simply sleep peacefully next to him. Despite her earlier innocent intentions, she desperately admits to herself that she secretly craves his touch even more. A soft gasp escapes her trembling lips as his gentle caresses send powerful shivers down her spine. The quiet rustle of shifting fabric fills the dimly lit room as they tangle intimately closer together beneath the heavy sheets. Lost in the overwhelming physical sensations, they share a deeply profound moment of silent, passionate intimacy. Suddenly breaking the heavy romantic tension, Ryo pulls back slightly and softly apologizes for pushing things too far. Instantly reassuring him, she shakes her head and quietly murmurs that an apology is completely unnecessary between them. Their hearts pound loudly in absolute unison, the rapid rhythm echoing the undeniable tension still lingering in the air. A comfortable yet highly charged silence falls over the shared bed as they simply stare deeply into each other's eyes. Breaking the quiet atmosphere, he speaks her name with an incredible amount of raw, unguarded emotion. Laying his inner insecurities bare, he confesses that he desperately wants to cherish her but struggles to find the absolute best way to convey his true feelings. Touched by his incredibly vulnerable confession, a soft and deeply understanding smile graces her flushed face. Reaching out to gently hold his gaze, she warmly reassures him that she already completely understands the depth of his love. Melting happily into his strong arms, she fully accepts his devotion as they hold each other closer than ever before. Resting her head against his chest, she silently reflects that his genuine care and affection have been completely obvious to her right from the very beginning. Standing in the quiet stillness, Ryo gazes thoughtfully into the distance. Breaking the comfortable silence, he informs her that they must soon travel to the capital to officially report their marriage. Planning ahead, he reveals his intention to speak with his family once more when that inevitable time arrives. Turning toward her with unwavering earnestness, he confesses his deep desire for her to remain steadfastly by his side just like today. Moved by his heartfelt vulnerability, Eliza stares back at him with widening eyes. Smiling warmly at her future husband, she unhesitatingly agrees to stand beside him. Sharing a tender and peaceful moment, the newly engaged couple softly bids each other a good night. The tranquil scene abruptly shifts as a majestic horse-drawn carriage rolls forcefully toward its destination. Observing the grand architecture from afar, an unseen visitor remarks that Wilhelm Castle is truly as beautiful as the widespread rumors claim. Staring intently at the towering fortress, the mysterious arrival confidently declares that their long-held wish will finally be fulfilled. Elsewhere within the bustling castle walls, a servant cheerfully calls out to Lady Eliza. Gracefully accepting a small jar from the staff, she warmly expresses her thanks while noting it is exactly what they discussed previously. Watching the lively exchange with mild confusion, Ryo curiously questions what the two women are talking about. Holding up the small jar, Eliza explains it contains an exquisite orange jam made from Levi's grandmother's recipe before eagerly offering the prince a taste. Intrigued by the sweet treat, Ryo calmly agrees to have a portion. A sudden, unexpected spark of realization flashes through the room. Watching the usually stoic prince act so straightforwardly, the servants whisper among themselves with barely contained excitement. Blushing slightly in his presence, Eliza softly thanks him for his actions yesterday while hesitantly searching for the right words. Admitting her deep vulnerability, she confesses that having Lord Ryo securely by her side made her feel completely at ease. Looking down with a shy smile, she explains that lying next to him made their impending marriage suddenly feel incredibly real. Overcome with embarrassment by her own boldness, she sheepishly admits that she simply got a little carried away. Startled by a sudden clattering noise, they both glance up in sheer surprise. Brushing off the interruption, Ryo firmly requests that Eliza accompany him for a moment despite her flustered protests about their current state. Promising the staff she will return quickly, she frantically calls out for the prince to wait as he suddenly grabs her hand to lead her away. Stumbling slightly under his swift pace, she follows his lead down the corridor while letting out a highly confused gasp. Stopping in a private area, He reveals that he has been thinking about this specific gesture the entire time while they wait for the official arrangements to be completed. Reaching carefully into his pocket, he tenderly explains that he wanted to give her something special in the meantime. Taking her delicate hand in his, he gently slips a stunning piece of jewelry onto her finger. The shimmering, finely crafted gemstone catches the light beautifully against her pale skin. Overwhelmed by the gorgeous and unexpected gift, she gazes down at it and breathlessly whispers how utterly beautiful it is. Revealing his thoughtful gesture, he explains that he personally chose the stone while praying for her future happiness, which leaves her pleasantly surprised. He offers a gentle smile and softly confirms her question with a simple affirmative. Holding her gaze with deep sincerity, he calls out her full name to capture her complete attention. Getting down to the heart of the matter, he earnestly asks for her hand in marriage. Overwhelmed by the profound proposal, she stares at him as a rush of emotions floods her racing heart. Gathering her breath, she joyfully accepts his heartfelt proposal with a soft but resolute answer. Sealing their newly formed promise, they lean in to share a tender and deeply emotional moment together. Pulling back slightly, a breathy exclamation escapes her lips as the magnitude of their commitment fully sets in. Tears of joy well up in her eyes as she happily confesses just how overjoyed she truly feels while addressing him by his formal title. Gently correcting her formal tone, he reminds her with a warm smile that she should just call him Ryo from now on. Blushing deeply at the newfound intimacy, she shyly tests out his name on her lips. Breaking the romantic tension, an observer playfully complains that they are displaying such intense affection right in the middle of breakfast. Pausing mid-complaint, the observer's expression softens as they take in the beautiful scene unfolding before them. Smiling warmly at the newly engaged couple, the onlooker sincerely admits how truly glad they are for both of them. Meanwhile, the estate bursts into a flurry of energetic activity as preparations for the highly anticipated upcoming event begin in earnest. A cheerful servant expresses delight over how thoroughly the castle is being cleaned for the guests, while Ryo firmly relies on Ike to handle today's heavy responsibilities. Radiating pure confidence, Ike proudly promises to take care of absolutely everything without a single hitch. Turning to the bride-to-be, the loyal attendants assure Eliza that they will do everything in their absolute power to ensure her mother can attend the ceremony. Deeply moved by their unwavering support, she beams brightly and enthusiastically accepts their incredibly kind offer. Suddenly, a formal announcement echoes through the grand halls declaring the highly anticipated arrival of Lord Lumen and his esteemed party. Heavy footsteps ring out as the massive doors swing open to reveal the distinguished visitors stepping into the grand foyer. The imposing delegation strides confidently forward while projecting an undeniable aura of regal authority and importance. The prominent foreign chancellor completely halts his confident advance as he finally stands face to face with the waiting royal hosts. Offering a deeply respectful bow, the visiting dignitary smoothly initiates the incredibly important diplomatic exchange. Formally introducing himself, the distinguished man proudly declares his title as Chancellor Lumen Sol of the Lucius Kingdom while politely greeting Prince Ryo. Maintaining his deeply respectful posture, the Chancellor extends his sincere gratitude for receiving the generous invitation to such a momentous occasion. Stepping forward to receive the greeting, Ryo warmly welcomes the honored guests to Wilhelm and greatly appreciates them making the long journey. Shifting the focus of the intense conversation, the prince respectfully addresses the chancellor directly by name. Stepping bravely to the forefront, Eliza formally introduces herself and humbly thanks the foreign chancellor for his crucial efforts regarding her mother. Flashing a knowing smile, the chancellor warmly states that it is a great honor to meet her while admitting he instantly recognized who she was at first glance. Politely declining the offer to rest in a prepared room, the guest firmly states that it will not be necessary. Bowing respectfully, the host immediately offers to lead the way to their destination. Expressing gratitude for the hastily arranged meeting, the speaker emphasizes that they have an urgent reason to hurry. Prompting for more details, the host questions the exact nature of this sudden urgency. Revealing the grim reality, the envoy explains that Lady Eliza's mother, Lady Mia, is currently convalescing from a serious illness. Quickly assuring the shocked listeners, the messenger notes that the doctor considers her condition entirely stable. Wasting no time, Ryo declares his intent to visit the recuperation site with Eliza as soon as possible and begin preparations to welcome Lady Mia to Wilhelm. Halting the prince's eager plans, the envoy interjects and asks him to wait so they can present a specific proposal regarding the matter. Acknowledging the sudden shift in tone, Ryo questions the proposal as the envoy admits to withholding details in order to speak directly. Pausing dramatically, the speaker prepares to deliver the Lucius Kingdom's true intentions. Dropping an absolute bombshell, the envoy formally requests to annul the royal engagement and take Lady Eliza back to Lucius. Stunned by the outrageous demand, Eliza gasps in sheer disbelief. Rejecting the demand outright, Rio fiercely declares that the marriage is already decided and annulling it is completely impossible. Pushing back against the prince's authority, the envoy points out that the engagement has not yet been officially announced to the general public. Gripping the table as tension thickens the air, the envoy begs His Highness to hear out their reasoning completely. Framing the audacious request as a matter of national security, the messenger insists this proposal directly concerns Rio and the very future of Wilhelm. Frowning at the grave implication, Rio narrows his eyes and questions how this involves his kingdom's future. Commanding the room's attention, the envoy addresses the lingering dark secrets known to everyone present. Confronting the elephant in the room, the speaker boldly brings up the sinister rumors branding Lady Mia as an actual witch. Staring gravely at the assembly, the envoy vows to finally reveal the absolute truth behind the terrifying allegations. Absorbing the heavy declaration, the prince remains silent while his expression hardens into an unreadable mask. Yielding to the gravity of the situation, Rio coldly orders the messenger to continue the explanation. A tense silence falls over the room as the envoy gathers their thoughts to recount a deeply buried history. Beginning the ancient tale, the speaker describes an old legend originating from the deep eastern forests of the Lucius Kingdom. Delving into mythical history, the envoy speaks of a forgotten race that supposedly possessed the terrifying power to completely control human hearts. Explaining the fate of these people, the messenger clarifies that the Arte descendants still exist today as ordinary humans because their magical bloodline thinned and vanished long ago. Dropping another staggering revelation, the speaker confirms that Lady Eliza's mother is indeed a direct descendant of the Arte bloodline. Explaining the catastrophic anomaly, the envoy reveals that a rare mutation occurred within Lady Mia that forcefully awakened the long-lost mind control powers. Detailing the tragic consequences, the messenger claims that Lady Mia unknowingly used her awakened power to drive Lord Adal mad and plunge the Luna domain into absolute crisis. Shattering any remaining doubt, the envoy states that Lady Mia herself officially acknowledged this horrific fact while the listeners gasp in sheer horror. Reaching out desperately, Eliza begs them to pause and wait. Overwhelmed by the horrifying revelation, she struggles to process the idea that her own mother would do such a terrible thing. Acknowledging her deep shock, Lumen smoothly reassures Lady Eliza. He clarifies that Lady Mia did not intentionally manipulate Adal, explaining that the Arte inherently control others by gazing into their eyes and speaking to their hearts. He elaborates that her mother's mystical power simply ran wild and became entirely uncontrollable. Desperate for answers, Eliza frantically asks why such a tragic disaster happened. Pausing dramatically, Lumen prepares to reveal the difficult and heavy truth. He drops a bombshell confession that Lady Mia actually harbored deep romantic feelings for Adal. Utterly stunned by the unexpected revelation, Eliza lets out a breathy gasp of sheer confusion. Lumen explains that when romantic feelings sprout toward another person, the Arte's power violently falls out of the user's control. Consequently, her uncontrollable magic brought about complete ruin regardless of her true and innocent intentions. Shifting his intense gaze, Lumen solemnly addresses Lady Eliza directly. He ominously warns that as Mia's daughter, there is a dangerous possibility that the exact same power lies dormant within her. Gripping her chest in quiet terror, Eliza questions if she truly harbors such a terrifying curse. Lumen quickly tells her not to fear, surprisingly revealing that he is also a descendant of the Arte. He passionately explains that they are creating a peaceful sanctuary in Lucius where their remaining kin are warmly welcomed. Noting that Arte magic does not affect their own kind, he promises that she and her mother could finally live there in absolute peace. Stepping decisively into the tense conversation, Prince Rio coldly acknowledges Lumen's calculated logic. Shielding his fiancée, Rio firmly declares that Eliza possesses no such dangerous magic. Bowing slightly, Lumen respectfully counters that they cannot rule out the terrifying possibility of the power awakening in the future. Pushing his agenda further, Lumen boldly suggests that even if it never awakens, she might not be the best match for His Highness. Refusing to back down, the envoy asks for permission to speak even more freely on the delicate matter. Lumen provocatively claims he senses a faint unease hidden beneath the prince's stubborn obstinacy. He aggressively points out that Rio must have previously refused countless prestigious matches with other noble ladies. Staring piercingly at the prince, Lumen questions why Rio suddenly agreed to an engagement this specific time. Glaring with lethal intensity, Rio dangerously commands Lumen to watch his tongue. The prince furiously demands to know if the envoy is outright implying he is being controlled by magic. A suffocating and heavy silence fills the room as the enraged prince glares down the defiant envoy. Unflinching under the royal pressure, Lumen smoothly defends his bold accusations as pure and genuine concern. Bypassing the prince entirely, Lumen pivots sharply and flinches Eliza with a direct question. He corners her emotionally by asking if she loves His Highness and secretly wished for him to love her back. Stammering helplessly, Eliza struggles to find her voice as Lumen ruthlessly interrupts her defense. Seizing total control of the narrative, Lumen coldly advises that it would be exceptionally wise to avoid such a dangerous gamble. He deliberately weaponizes her tragic heritage, ominously referring to her as a witch's daughter. Sneering at the very concept, Lumen mocks the absurd idea of a witch and a prince actually falling in love.